Vincent Sanders stared at the glowing numbers on his car's dashboard. 7:30 a.m. He was already 20 minutes behind schedule. The Seattle traffic, as usual, crawled at a snail's pace. His phone, balanced precariously between his shoulder and ear, buzzed with the voice of an anxious board member. She demanded updates on a looming corporate crisis at TechVision, the technology firm Vincent had built from the ground up. As he navigated his sleek black Range Rover through the congested streets, his gaze flickered to the rearview mirror. 4-year-old Paige, petite for her age, clutched a well-loved stuffed rabbit. She was looking out the window with her big blue eyes, the same blue Catherine, his late wife, had. Despite her usual quiet demeanor, Vincent could tell she sensed his tension. "Sir, the board is expecting your final say on the acquisition terms this afternoon," the voice on the phone reminded him. Vincent pinched the bridge of his nose, frustration mounting. The council had been pressuring him to finalize a major property deal in downtown Seattle. They believed it would skyrocket the company's real estate and expansion prospects. Marcus Blackwood, a senior board member, had been particularly insistent. Vincent felt the clock ticking in every sense. His corporation's future hinged on this project, but so did his own sanity. He glanced at Paige again. "I just need to drop Paige off and I'll be in the office," he said, doing his best to sound collected. But nothing about this morning felt smooth. Normally, his schedule ran like clockwork. Breakfast at 6:30, out the door by 7:15, drop Paige at the prestigious Academy Infantil Westlake by 7:45, then a swift drive to TechVision headquarters. Today, everything was slipping out of his control. As he spotted a bright, colorful Victorian house up ahead, Vincent ended the call curtly. He pulled over, phone still in hand, half listening to the last frantic words from the board member. The sign outside read, "Little Explorers Daycare." Amid the swirl of urgent thoughts, Vincent barely registered the mismatch. He was convinced this was Westlake's side entrance, or a newly painted annex, anything to justify the festive facade. Paige unbuckled herself with her usual silent compliance, hugging her rabbit. A woman with curly red hair opened the gate. She gave Vincent a curious look, clearly noting his grey Italian suit and polished demeanor that stood out from the more casual parents. He greeted her politely, introduced his daughter, and took a quick look around. The place was all bright colors and whimsical decorations, with a large chalkboard on the porch scrawled with kids' drawings. The warm smell of waffles wafted through the open door. Ellie Parker, the daycare's director, bent down to Paige's level. "Hi, sweetheart. My name's Ellie. What's your name?" Paige smiled shyly. "Paige," she whispered, clutching her rabbit tighter. Ellie's gentle tone seemed to put her at ease. Vincent, meanwhile, noticed a slight confusion in Ellie's eyes when she asked, "Are you new? We usually have a little orientation for families." Vincent glanced at his watch, adrenaline spiking. "This morning has been hectic. Sorry if I'm rushing. She's Paige Sanders. Here's the contact form." He scribbled his signature where Ellie indicated. His phone rang again, the screen flashing with TechVision's main line. "I have to take this," he muttered, stepping aside. Within a few moments, Ellie ushered Paige inside, leaving Vincent alone on the porch. He intended to say goodbye to Paige, but the phone call consumed him, something about a last-minute contract change. He murmured a promise to come back later and retreated to his car. In his rush, he never noticed that this place was absolutely not the sleek Academy Infantil Westlake with its modern glass walls and security systems. Driving away, Vincent felt an odd twinge in his chest. Was it guilt or just more stress? He tried to ignore it, rationalizing that Paige was safe and he would be back to check on her soon. He had no reason to question the drop-off. He'd been so immersed in the TechVision crisis that he overlooked small details. The bright paintings on the fence, the wind chimes near the doorway. the sign that clearly spelled Little Explorers. All he saw was a daycare with children, a friendly face, and a spot-to-leave page. Minutes later, he merged onto the expressway, mind fully on the upcoming board meeting. Subtly, though, Catherine's face flickered in his memory. She used to tease him for his single-minded focus on success, urging him to slow down and see Page's world. The recollection brought a fleeting wave of sadness. With a sigh, Vincent forced his eyes back to the road. He never guessed that in the span of a morning, his carefully controlled life would tilt in an entirely new direction. The phone buzzed again, jolting him back to corporate reality. Yet in the back of his mind, a small voice whispered that this day, this odd, unintentional mistake, might lead him somewhere unexpected. There was no time to think of it now. He raced onward, convinced that once he wrapped up business at TechVision, everything at home would fall neatly into place. Vincent stormed into TechVision's glass-walled boardroom later that morning, tie slightly askew, clutching a leather folder stuffed with reports. The bustle of early meetings had died down, replaced by a tense hush as the main board members waited for him. Diane Chen, his sharp-eyed executive assistant, stood by the table, scanning her tablet. She offered Vincent a sympathetic nod as he sat, clearly sensing his agitation. Marcus Blackwood, a tall man in his late 50s with silver hair swept back in a precise cut, cleared his throat. "You're late," he remarked tersely. The rest of the board, a mix of men and women in tailored suits, shifted in their seats. They had all heard about the pressing real estate deal, an old property near downtown with enormous development potential. The plan was to buy it, tear it down, and build a high-end tech hub. Marcus, known for his ambition, was leading the charge. Vincent gave a curt nod. "My apologies," he replied, voice tight. "Unexpected personal matters." He opened his folder and began presenting figures on projected profits, strategic partnerships, and the timeline for closing the deal. His explanation was smooth, confident. Yet, despite the collected exterior, his mind wandered to Paige. Was she settling in all right at Daycare? He fidgeted with the corner of a page, reminding himself to call during the mid-morning break. Just as Vincent wrapped up, Diane quietly approached and handed him his phone. A confused expression crossed her face. "It's something about Paige," she whispered. Vincent's heart jolted. He paused his presentation, ignoring the board's curious stares, and stepped aside to answer. On the line, a polite yet puzzled voice from the Academy Infantile Westlake inquired whether Paige would be attending today. They had not seen her all morning. Vincent's grip on the phone tightened. Fear clutched at his chest. He forced himself to remain calm. "She's not there?" His mind raced, trying to reconcile the discrepancy. He had dropped Paige off, hadn't he? Then, in a flash, he pictured the brightly painted Victorian house. That was not Westlake. "I'll call you back," he murmured, ending the call abruptly. The entire boardroom seemed to swirl around him. Diane's concerned gaze met his. He could tell she knew something was off. Marcus tapped his pen impatiently. "Sanders, we have urgent matters here. The property closure is in 2 days. If we don't finalize our plans, the council will be disappointed, and you know how that affects shareholder confidence." Vincent tried to speak, but the words came out jagged. "I understand, but I need a brief recess." Without waiting for a reply, he gestured to Diane to follow him into the corridor. Breath ragged, he whispered the truth. "I think I left Paige at the wrong daycare." Diane's eyes widened with alarm, but she quickly regained composure. She suggested that he go and fetch his daughter immediately and that she would handle the board's pressing concerns. "Vincent," she said gently, "go." "I'll tell them there's a family emergency." He sighed with profound relief, feeling grateful that at least one person in the company understood his struggle as a single father. Before leaving, He tossed the folder on the conference table and met Marcus's gaze. "Family emergency," he repeated. Marcus frowned, but Vincent didn't wait for further objections. On the drive away from Tech Vision, he recalled the tragedy that had left him in this state of perpetual tension. Catherine's death 2 years ago, in a sudden car accident, had torn his life in half. Since then, he'd poured every ounce of energy into controlling every detail: his company, Paige's education, even the brand of cereal they ate. Control, he believed, protected him from chaos. And yet here he was, having made a careless mistake that felt worse than any boardroom blunder. Approaching a red light, Vincent's mind flicked through frantic possibilities. Could Paige be scared? Did the strangers at this unknown daycare know how to reach him if something went wrong? Guilt gnawed at him. He prided himself on meticulous scheduling, ensuring Paige lacked nothing. He had chosen Westlake for its reputation, its academic focus, even though Paige rarely smiled in that ultra-structured environment. But it had seemed best, and that was all that mattered to Vincent. He sped down the streets toward the Victorian house he vaguely recalled. The phone in his pocket vibrated incessantly, likely the board, or Marcus, or perhaps his own guilt calling him back. But he ignored it. Paige was priority now. Realizing how little time he spent truly paying attention to her day-to-day life pained him more than any corporate failure ever could. Tension knotted between his shoulders as he turned onto an unfamiliar block, scanning for the bright Little Explorers sign. She had to be safe. He told himself that once he fixed this blunder, he would never let his attention slip again. Yet a quiet voice at the back of his mind wondered if Paige had finally found a glimpse of joy away from his relentless perfectionism. The question unsettled him, echoing as he parked and prepared to hurry inside, ready to face whatever awaited him behind that colorful gate. Vincent's heart thudded against his chest as he stepped through the gate of the Victorian house. The morning sun illuminated the cheerful sign, Little Explorers, Daycare. A light breeze carried the laughter of children from the backyard. Something about the vibrant colors and squeals of delight made this place feel entirely different from the glossy, regimented halls of Westlake. He walked in, scanning the cozy front room. The decor was a patchwork of bright posters, shelves brimming with picture books, and a scattering of hand-drawn artwork tacked to the walls. The faint smell of fresh crayons and fruit snacks filled the air. It struck Vincent how homely and informal it all appeared. Where were the expensive touchscreen boards, the sleek security cameras, the crisp uniforms he associated with a proper daycare? Suddenly, a warm voice interrupted his thoughts. "Mr. Sanders?" He turned to see Ellie Parker, the red-headed woman who had greeted him earlier. She approached with an air of calm confidence, wearing a floral sundress and simple sandals. Strands of her curly hair escaped a loose braid. There was nothing corporate about her, no stiff posture, no forced politeness. Her green eyes searched his face kindly, but held a clear hint of curiosity. "Yes," Vincent managed, nerves tight. "I apologize for the confusion. I realized I brought Paige here by mistake." He paused, uncertain how to proceed. Ellie gave him a sympathetic smile and motioned for him to follow her toward the backyard. As they walked, Vincent caught glimpses of children engaged in various activities. One group painted large sheets of butcher paper. Another crafted small clay figurines. A few, including Paige, were running around an expansive garden dotted with wooden play structures. "Your daughter is having a lovely morning," Ellie remarked, her tone free of judgment. "She's quite shy, but she's warming up to the others." Through a window, Vincent spotted Paige giggling as a little boy helped her chase soap bubbles across the grass. Vincent couldn't remember the last time he'd seen his daughter so animated at Westlake. Typically, she returned home withdrawn, clinging to her stuffed rabbit in the back seat while he recounted his day's deadlines. "It looks, Vincent exhaled, searching for the right word, different from Westlake." Ellie nodded, her expression reflecting both pride and gentle disagreement. "We believe in learning through play, exploration, and creativity. Structure is important, but there's more than one way to foster a child's development." Before Vincent could respond, a young man with a friendly grin and a neat beard approached, wearing a playful dinosaur-printed shirt. "Hey, Ellie, do we have more construction paper? The kids want to make hats." Ellie introduced him as Noah, an assistant teacher. Noah offered Vincent a quick wave before darting off to gather supplies. Vincent noted the easygoing rapport between Ellie and her staff, something reminiscent of a family dynamic. They finally reached Paige, who was crouched over a cluster of dandelions near the fence. A small group of children pointed out yellow butterflies dancing among the blossoms. Paige, her cheeks flushed from running, glanced up at Vincent, and a broad smile flashed across her face. "Daddy!" she called out. The relief that flooded Vincent at seeing her safe and happy came as a slight surprise. He had expected tears or complaints that she wasn't at her usual daycare. Instead, Paige looked joyful. He crouched down, adjusting his tie that seemed comically out of place in this whimsical setting. "Are you okay?" he asked, hand on her shoulder. Paige nodded, showing him the butterfly perched on her finger. "I like it here. Can we stay?" she asked, eyes brimming with excitement. Vincent swallowed, unsure how to respond. He glanced at Ellie, whose raised brow indicated she, too, was curious. "Well," Vincent began hesitantly, "this was an accident. I actually meant to drop you off at Westlake, but—" The words stuck in his throat as he noticed Paige's expression shift from hope to disappointment. The guilt that had been simmering since the phone call at Tech Vision now erupted anew. "But we'll talk about it," he finished lamely, not wanting to extinguish that light in her eyes. Ellie placed a gentle hand on Paige's shoulder. "We're happy to have her for as long as she wants to be here," she said. "But I understand if there's a mix-up, Mr. Sanders." Her voice remained calm, yet Vincent sensed her curiosity. He wondered how often she encountered parents dressed in expensive suits who considered a place like this beneath their standards. In truth, he had once been exactly that kind of parent, meticulously calculating every detail of Paige's education, from language immersion to advanced math programs. "Thank you," Vincent replied, clearing his throat. I appreciate you taking care of Paige." He glanced at his phone, which buzzed again with messages from the office. Ellie seemed to notice. She gestured back toward the house. "I can watch Paige until you're free. She's welcome to stay a while longer." Part of Vincent wanted to scoop his daughter up and race back to familiar territory. Yet seeing her wave and laugh with the other kids made him pause. Despite all his reservations, he found himself nodding. "I'll come back this afternoon," he said quietly. Ellie smiled, and Paige's eyes lit up. As Vincent walked away, he felt a strange, unaccustomed tug at his heart. It was as though, for the first time in ages, he was questioning the rigid plans he had made. He had no idea how drastically this simple daycare mistake would alter his life, but he sensed something shifting inside him, a small crack in the walls he had built ever since Catherine's death. Vincent's mind churned with conflicting thoughts as he headed back to Tech Vision. The route was the same as always, but something felt different, like a distant hum underscoring the city noise. Paige's laughter at little explorers replayed in his head. He wondered if it was simply the novelty or if his daughter genuinely preferred that vibrant environment. Stepping out of the elevator onto the executive floor, Vincent found Diane awaiting him with a concerned expression. "Are you all right?" she asked softly, walking by his side toward his office. "Everything is fine with Paige, yes?" Vincent nodded, though he still felt a bit of residual anxiety. Paige was fine, more than fine, in fact. She seemed radiant in that colorful little daycare, while he was the one who felt out of place. Inside Vincent's sleek, modern office, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Seattle's skyline. Glass shelves displayed TechVision's awards and prototypes. The polished hardwood floors and minimalist furniture reflected the controlled image Vincent had cultivated. Everything was streamlined, high-tech, and expensive, an opposite world compared to the painted walls and rummage of art supplies he'd seen earlier. Diane updated him on the morning's fallout. Marcus Blackwood had called twice, demanding to know why Vincent had walked out. The board was restless. The acquisition timeline was pressing. Vincent could almost feel Marcus's frustration radiating through the phone as he scanned a message from him. "We can't afford delays, Sanders. The council expects your signature by week's end." With a sigh, Vincent sank into his ergonomic chair. He could handle high-pressure deals. He thrived on them, actually. But today's tension felt different. Memories of the carefree grin on Paige's face mingled with the recollection of how subdued she usually was after a day at Westlake. He tapped a pen against the desk, recalling how Catherine had once told him that a child's happiness wasn't measured by perfect test scores or fancy certificates. A gentle knock sounded at the door. Diane peeked in. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but the council meeting is in 10 minutes. They're waiting for you in the main conference room." Vincent gave a curt nod, steeling himself for another round of questions about the property deal. As he walked down the corridor, he couldn't help but notice the hush that followed him. Employees, used to his usual unshakable demeanor, sensed a different mood about him. In the large conference room, an imposing table surrounded by high-backed chairs took center stage. Various department heads glanced at Vincent expectantly. Marcus stood near the head of the table, arms crossed. Once everyone settled, Vincent launched into an update on the acquisition. He spoke of potential revenue streams, new technology labs, and synergy with Seattle's growing market. Yet as he presented, his mind occasionally wandered back to the name Little Explorers. He recalled the whimsical sign and how the children's laughter seemed to breathe life into that old Victorian house. Halfway through a slide, Marcus interrupted. "So, you'll finalize the real estate contract by this Friday." His tone carried an edge, hinting that any deviation would be seen as incompetence. Vincent straightened. "Yes, the timeline should still be manageable, but we may need an extra day or two for a thorough review. I don't want any overlooked clauses." Marcus's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing more. When the meeting concluded, Vincent lingered behind, rubbing tiredly at his temples. Diane came over, handing him a folder with the property's details. As he flipped through the pages, a photo of the structure to be demolished caught his eye. It showed the same Victorian style as the Daycare, though the image was from decades ago. Something inside Vincent twisted. Could it be the same place? The address looked familiar, but his mind refused to connect the dots fully. "Are you sure this is the right address?" he asked Diane quietly, pointing to the line that read 2419 Mayfair Street. She glanced at her own notes. "Yes, that's the site. The building is old, but well located for TechVision's expansion." Marcus said the occupant had already been given notice. Vincent's stomach knotted. He recalled the cheerful sign, Little Explorers, Daycare, located on Mayfair Street. This wasn't a mere coincidence. Suddenly, the walls seemed to close in around him. If TechVision went through with the acquisition, that meant Paige's newfound sanctuary, if that's what it truly was, could be razed to the ground. How would Ellie Parker react upon learning that her daycare was part of a corporate development plan? And how would Paige handle it after finally finding a place she seemed to love? Vincent didn't share his revelation with Diane. He simply nodded and collected the folder, forcing his expression back into the polished neutrality he was known for. But inside, turmoil roiled. Page was content in a place that his own company planned to shut down. What kind of father would he be if he let that happen without a second thought? Back in his office, he found a small, hand-drawn note that Page had scribbled the day before. A simple crayon picture of her holding hands with him under a bright sun. He stared at it, absorbing the innocence and trust it conveyed. For the first time in years, Vincent felt uncertain of his path. The sense of absolute control he once relied on began to waver, leaving him to question what truly mattered in his carefully constructed world. That evening, Vincent stood in his stainless steel kitchen, absently stirring a pot of mac and cheese while Page sat at the dining table. Their modern apartment, perched on the 25th floor of a downtown high-rise, boasted sweeping views of Seattle's twinkling lights. Yet Vincent felt an odd emptiness inside. He thought of how the cozy rooms at Little Explorers seemed so alive, while this sleek, minimalist space seemed almost too quiet. Page swung her legs under the chair, her bunny perched on her lap. "Daddy," she began in a small voice, "can I go back to the colorful house tomorrow?" Vincent paused, meeting her gaze. The hope in her bright eyes was almost tangible. A pang of guilt surged within him. He recalled how easily she blended in there, how she smiled and laughed freely, a stark contrast to her usual timid reserve. He set down the spoon, pressing his lips into a thin line. "Page," he started slowly. "You know you're enrolled at Westlake, right? That's your school." She looked down, fiddling with the bunny's ear. "But I like the other place better. They have a big garden, and Ellie sings songs with us. She taught me a butterfly song today." Her wide-eyed sincerity made Vincent's heart ache. He could offer her the best of everything money could buy, but he couldn't force her happiness. After dinner, Vincent guided Page to her bedroom. He tucked her into a canopy bed with pink sheets, decorations he'd chosen in a rush, thinking any standard, girly style would suffice. She clutched her bunny while he read a short bedtime story. Her eyelids grew heavy, and she drifted off to sleep, mumbling about flowers and butterflies. He brushed a strand of blonde hair from her forehead, feeling the weight of his dilemma. Abide by a carefully laid plan, or consider Page's new sense of joy. Later, Vincent found himself in his home office, sifting through a box of personal memorabilia. Catherine's favorite scarf lay folded atop old photographs. As he lifted it, a sealed envelope fluttered out. Recognizing Catherine's handwriting, he felt a rush of emotion. He gently opened it. Inside, a simple note read, "Promise me you'll do everything you can to keep our little girl happy, free, and loved." He had nearly forgotten those words, written shortly before Catherine's death. Tears blurred his vision. Vincent sank into his desk chair, recalling the days when he and Catherine would talk about raising Page with freedom to explore, to discover her own passions. After the accident, fear drove him to overcompensate. He mapped out every detail of Page's life like a business strategy, believing that control would keep her safe. Yet now, with this accidental detour, Page had shown more spark and laughter in one day than she had in weeks at Westlake. He spent a restless night, haunted by the memory of Catherine's voice, the board's demands, and Page's shining eyes. By morning, Vincent had decided to at least see how Page fared at Little Explorers, if he allowed her to stay. He tried convincing himself it was just temporary. He would gather facts, weigh options, and maintain control. But a flicker of something else stirred in him, a sense that maybe he should trust Page's instincts. The next morning, Vincent helped Page get dressed, choosing casual clothes instead of the expensive uniform she wore for Westlake. Page's face lit up when he mentioned revisiting the colorful house. He felt a surge of relief that surprised him with its intensity. After all, he reminded himself, it was just a short experiment. He planned to pick her up early anyway, to ensure she wouldn't miss anything critical at Westlake, though he couldn't ignore the small voice telling him she was missing nothing she truly needed there. They left the apartment, weaving through traffic once again. Vincent called Diane from the car, instructing her to postpone his first meeting. "You sure about this?" Diane asked. "Marcus won't be pleased." Vincent glanced at Paige in the rearview mirror, noticing the hope in her expression. "He'll have to manage," Vincent replied. The hush on the other end told him Diane was surprised. Pulling up to the Victorian house felt oddly comforting this time. The sun was rising, casting a golden glow on the painted facade. Paige practically bounced out of the car, hugging her bunny. Vincent took a deep breath, gripping the steering wheel before stepping outside. Ellie Parker was already out front, watering potted plants. She smiled warmly when she saw Paige, though her gaze flickered with mild surprise at Vincent's presence. "Morning," he said, trying to sound casual. "We'd, like to give this place another try." Ellie nodded, her eyes betraying curiosity. "Of course," she replied. She knelt down to greet Paige, who offered a beaming grin. As Vincent watched them, something within him shifted, a small loosening of the chains he'd wrapped around his heart. He didn't know where this path would lead, and he definitely hadn't told Ellie about the property deal, but for now, he'd made a choice. Paige's happiness took precedence, and he was willing to see what blossomed from that single, life-altering mistake. Vincent arrived at Little Explorers the following morning, juggling his phone in one hand and a takeout coffee in the other. He had planned a short, formal conversation with Ellie Parker, nothing more than a quick arrangement for Paige to attend for just a week. But as soon as he stepped through the colorful gate, he sensed that nothing about this meeting would be as simple as he'd envisioned. Ellie greeted him on the porch, wearing a casual denim jacket over a flowing skirt. Several parents came and went, exchanging cheerful waves with her. Standing beside Ellie was an older woman with silver hair pulled into a neat bun. She leaned on a floral-patterned cane, observing Vincent with a thoughtful expression. "Good morning, Mr. Sanders," Ellie said, her tone measured. She recognized the guarded stance Vincent carried, particularly in how he kept adjusting the cuffs of his tailored shirt. "This is Martha Sullivan, the owner of this house and the property. Martha, this is Paige's father." Martha offered a kind, wrinkled hand. "Pleasure to meet you. Ellie told me Paige might be staying with us for a bit." Her voice had a slight tremor, but her blue eyes sparkled with curiosity. Vincent shook her hand, inwardly noting that she must be the landlord and that he might soon be signing papers to purchase and demolish this very house. The thought made his chest tighten with guilt. "Yes, about that," Vincent began, clearing his throat. "I'd like Paige to attend the daycare on a trial basis for a week. I realize she's been coming here by mistake, but she seems to like it." He forced a brief smile, remembering Paige's insistent pleas that morning. Ellie gave a small nod, though a hint of caution still lingered in her eyes. "I want to ensure we're not just a novelty for Paige. We have a routine here, albeit a more flexible one than most places, but we do believe in continuity and making the children feel safe." Vincent took a sip of coffee, carefully picking his words. "I assure you, it's not a casual decision." In truth, it was a decision he'd agonized over the previous night, yet despite his internal turmoil, he couldn't deny that Paige had shown more joy in 2 days here than in months at Westlake. Martha's gaze remained fixed on Vincent. "You must be a busy man, running a big company, yet you've taken the time to come personally. That tells me you care a great deal for your daughter." Something in her tone suggested she knew more about him than he realized. Perhaps Ellie had shared a bit of their initial encounter. Still, Vincent sensed genuine warmth rather than any attempt at prying. Just then, the door burst open and a small parade of children emerged, cheering about an upcoming baking activity. Vincent glimpsed Paige among them, beaming as she held hands with a friend. Ellie explained that they were learning basic math by measuring cookie ingredients. "It's hands-on," she said with a proud smile. "Kids see numbers in action instead of just on a worksheet." Vincent watched as Noah, the friendly assistant teacher, led the group inside to the kitchen. The children's excitement was contagious. Paige caught sight of Vincent and waved fervently, then followed the others with an eager skip. A strange mixture of relief and longing swirled within him. On one hand, he was glad she was adapting. On the other, he felt a pang for not being part of this slice of her day. Martha gently tapped her cane on the porch step, drawing Vincent's attention back. "I lost my husband a decade ago," she shared, unprompted. "He and I had a dream of turning this old house into a welcoming place for children, something we never did when we were younger. Ellie came along later and brought that dream to life." Her eyes glossed briefly with memory. "Loss teaches us that time is precious. Don't you agree?" Vincent's throat constricted. He thought of Catherine and the promise he'd found in her handwriting. "I do," he murmured, meeting Martha's gaze. Aware that he might be treading dangerous ground, given the property deal, he forced himself to remain neutral. He wondered if she had any inkling of the looming threat to her daycare. Ellie cleared her throat softly. "So, we'll proceed with 1 week for Paige. I'll need some basic paperwork, contact information, and a bit more background to help us tailor activities to her. We do a lot of creative projects here, but we also keep track of developmental milestones." "Agreed," Vincent said. "You'll have all the documents by tomorrow." He drew in a slow breath, trying to maintain composure. Despite his professional facade, he sensed that Ellie and Martha could see through him. He wasn't just a CEO with a proposal, he was a father grappling with his daughter's happiness. Martha touched Vincent's sleeve lightly. "I look forward to seeing more of you," she said with a knowing smile. "It's brave to admit your carefully laid plans might not be perfect." Vincent nodded, swallowing hard. He'd come to propose a temporary arrangement, but he left with far more questions than answers. Paige would spend a week at Little Explorers. Yes, but what would happen after that, when Tech Vision's bulldozers came knocking? As he walked away, the weight of that contradiction pressed heavily on his shoulders, hinting at a conflict he could no longer ignore. Vincent found his daily routine shifting in small yet significant ways. Instead of driving directly to the gleaming corporate towers of Tech Vision first thing in the morning, he now factored in a detour to Little Explorers. Paige noticed the difference too, and though she never voiced it outright, Vincent could tell she felt more relaxed during their morning drives. She'd chatter about baking cookies, painting butterflies, and singing new songs Ellie had taught her. One overcast morning, while Vincent pulled up to the colorful daycare, Diane called him. He answered via the car's speaker. "Yes, Diane? Your 8 o'clock with the finance team is ready. They're waiting." Vincent sighed. "I'll be there as soon as I can. I have another drop-off first." He glanced at Paige, who was humming softly in the back seat, hugging her stuffed rabbit. Diane's pause spoke volumes. "Of course," she said gently. After walking Paige inside, Vincent lingered by the doorway, not sure why he felt compelled to observe a little longer. Noah was helping the kids hang their raincoats on tiny hooks, and Ellie was guiding a few children through a hands-on craft about weather patterns. "We're making clouds with cotton balls, and we'll talk about rain in Seattle," Ellie explained cheerfully. Paige was already immersed, picking bits of cotton and gluing them onto blue construction paper. Vincent found himself smiling, an expression he quickly schooled into neutrality when Ellie caught his eye. She offered a warm nod. In the back of his mind, he recalled the sterile, overstructured environment at Westlake. There, Paige had followed rules, but rarely seemed engaged or enthusiastic. The difference here was hard to ignore. As he returned to his car, Vincent realized he would have to adjust more than just his morning schedule. His entire approach to parenting and business might need rethinking. At Tech Vision, his colleagues began to notice changes in him. He was still punctual for major appointments, but minor meetings shifted. He no longer barked orders if discussions ran over time. Instead, he would quietly pack up and explain he had to pick up his daughter. Though some department heads muttered that he seemed distracted, Diane watched these alterations with discreet approval. She had long believed that Vincent needed to let go of his rigid tendencies. Meanwhile, Paige's transformation was unmistakable. She came home singing silly songs, excitedly recounting how she'd planted sunflower seeds in a little garden bed behind the daycare. One evening, she insisted on showing Vincent how to make homemade Play-Doh. Before, Paige would slip away to her room after dinner, retreating into her own silent world. Now, she dragged Vincent into the kitchen, peppering him with enthusiastic instructions. "Daddy, we need flour, salt, and water," she declared, rummaging through cupboards. Vincent, wearing his crisp dress shirt after a long day, hesitated, but the sparkle in Paige's eyes dissolved any reservations. They ended up covered in white powder, giggling like co-conspirators. Vincent found himself kneading dough and sprinkling food coloring as Paige squealed with delight. For a man who thrived on control, it felt startlingly freeing to let go, even if just for a moment. However, not everyone shared his budding openness. Marcus Blackwood, eyes always fixed on the bottom line, grew impatient. One afternoon in Vincent's office, Marcus stepped in, shutting the door behind him. "We need to finalize the property deal, Sanders," he growled, arms folded across his broad chest. "We can't afford to drag our feet. That Victorian house on Mayfair Street is prime real estate, and the board expects you to seal the contract." Vincent forced a composed nod. "I've been reviewing the details. It may take a bit longer. There are some complexities with the current occupant." He hesitated, then added, "We should ensure the local community impact is minimal." Marcus narrowed his gaze. "Community impact? Since when did Tech Vision place that above expansion?" Vincent pursed his lips. "We've always balanced corporate growth with responsible development. It's part of our mission statement." A wry smile twisted Marcus's features. "Let's not kid ourselves. The mission statement is to keep investors happy. Don't lose sight of that, Sanders." As Marcus left, Vincent sank into his chair, shoulders tense. He flicked through an internal company report about the Mayfair property. Every time he saw the address, his stomach clenched with guilt. He pictured the children giggling over homemade crafts, oblivious to the looming threat. He saw Ellie's hopeful grin, or Martha's wise gaze. How could he bring himself to crush the place that was bringing Paige so much joy? Late that night, in his modern penthouse, Vincent struggled with sleeplessness. He found himself pacing the living room, phone in hand, scrolling through the property documents. At the bottom of one page, he noted a clause requiring tenant relocation assistance, a detail that rarely garnered attention in these deals. But maybe, he thought, it was a start. Could he help ensure little explorers survived somehow? Staring out the window at Seattle's glittering skyline, Vincent knew that ignoring this dilemma was no longer an option. His entire life had revolved around controlling outcomes, but now he faced an outcome he desperately wished to change. He wanted Paige to remain at Little Explorers, yet the corporation he led was poised to close its doors forever. Torn between fatherhood and corporate pressure, Vincent realized he couldn't stall forever. Something would have to give. Early the next day, Vincent arrived at the daycare before most parents, hoping to catch Ellie for a private conversation. The sky was still grey with dawn, and the Victorian house's porch light cast a soft glow. He found Ellie in the backyard garden, kneeling over a raised bed of vegetables. She wore gardening gloves and an old sweater, methodically weeding a row of lettuce. Noah was inside preparing snack stations, so Ellie was momentarily alone. "Good morning," Vincent said, stepping carefully on the dewy grass. Ellie glanced up, surprise flickering across her features. "Morning. You're here early," she noted. Vincent cleared his throat. I wanted to see how Paige is really doing, and also better understand what you do here. Her enthusiasm at home has changed so much." Ellie pulled off a glove, brushing a stray curl from her forehead. "I'm glad she's happy. Paige is a sweet kid, quiet but very observant. Yesterday she helped us label seed packets in the greenhouse. She seems to love anything hands-on." Vincent smiled faintly, imagining Paige's small fingers carefully organizing seeds. "That's wonderful," he murmured. "She never really mentioned activities at Westlake. You do things so differently here." Ellie rose, dusting off her knees. "Different isn't always better, you know. It's just our way. We believe in nurturing the whole child, mind, body, creativity, and emotions. Traditional academics have a place, but at this age, play is essential." She gestured toward the garden. "Children learn responsibility by caring for plants, empathy by understanding that living things need nurturing, and science by observing how things grow." Vincent took in the simple greenhouse, the colorful art strung along a nearby fence, and the mosaic stepping stones the kids had likely made. "It's a stark contrast to the test-focused approach at Westlake," he admitted. "I used to think structure was everything, but Paige seems lighter here. Sometimes children thrive when they feel seen," Ellie said gently. She studied Vincent's face, her green eyes softening. "If you don't mind me saying, you look tired. Are you sleeping okay?" He was momentarily taken aback by her directness. He'd built a fortress around his personal life, rarely allowing anyone, besides perhaps Diane, to peer inside. "I've got a lot on my mind," he admitted. He glanced at his phone, which flashed with corporate notifications. Ellie noticed but didn't pry. Instead, she invited him to follow her inside, where a small group of kids were gradually arriving. The interior bustled with morning energy, kids hanging coats, parents signing check-in sheets, and the aroma of fresh coffee drifting from a corner table where Martha now greeted everyone. Inside the main room, Vincent saw child-sized furniture arranged in clusters, each area devoted to a different activity: an art station, a reading nook, and a corner for building blocks. The children ranged from toddlers to kindergarten age. A vibrant mural of a tree with handprint leaves covered one wall, each leaf marked with a child's name. Ellie pulled him aside. "Welcome to my world, Vincent," she said with a slight smile. "Everything here has a purpose. We want the kids to learn empathy, communication, and creativity before they move on to more formal settings." He nodded, feeling unexpectedly grateful for her sincerity. "I appreciate it," he replied, though the guilt pricked at him again, remembering that TechVision planned to displace all this. Just then, Lily, a 5-year-old girl with leg braces, approached. She handed Ellie a drawing, a bright yellow sun with stick figure people beneath it. Vincent recognized Lily from glimpses before. Though physically limited, she had an infectious, beaming smile. "That's you, Ellie," Lily pointed to a curly-haired figure. Then she gestured to another figure that was tall and dark-haired. "And that's Mr. Sanders. Paige told me that's her daddy." Ellie's eyebrows arched in mild surprise. Vincent, a bit flustered, praised Lily's artwork. "It's lovely," he said, carefully. Lily grinned and headed off to show Noah her picture. "Kids notice everything," Ellie remarked softly. "She must have seen you here and decided you're part of our little community now." Vincent swallowed, the child's simple assumption stinging him. Part of him wanted to be part of something so genuine. Another part reminded him that he was the same man who might soon push these children out of their nurturing haven. "I should get going to the office," he said finally, checking the time. Before leaving, he glanced around once more. Noah was helping set up a pretend marketplace. Paige had arrived and rushed over to hug her father's leg in greeting. For a moment, Vincent contemplated revealing the property issue to Ellie, but fear of her reaction held him back. Instead, he forced a polite smile and said goodbye, stepping outside into the crisp morning air. As he drove away, Vincent realized that Ellie's world, this colorful, bustling daycare, was becoming vital to Paige's happiness. Yet he couldn't ignore the corporate storm gathering at his door. Soon, the clash between these two worlds would be impossible to avoid. Marcus Blackwood was waiting in Vincent's office when he returned from Little Explorers later that morning. The tall executive's stern face left no doubt about his impatience. Vincent, clutching a file of notes, sensed the tension ripple through the room. Diane, seated by her desk just outside, shot Vincent a concerned look. "Marcus," Vincent greeted, tempering his voice to remain cordial. "I didn't realize you were stopping by." Marcus's thin smile didn't reach his eyes. "Had a few urgent matters to discuss. Mind if we sit?" Vincent waved him in, closing the glass door behind them. He settled into his high-backed chair, forcing a calm he didn't fully feel. Marcus began immediately. "We've nearly completed negotiations for the Mayfair property. The sellers are ready to sign. Just need your final approval. The board expects quick action." Vincent pressed his fingertips together, carefully choosing his words. "I understand. However, I need to re-examine the relocation clause for the current occupants. There's a daycare functioning there, and we can't just..." "Can't just what?" Marcus interrupted, leaning forward. "Write them a check and move on. That's the standard procedure. We provide compensation, they relocate, end of story." His piercing stare demanded compliance. Vincent tried to hide his discomfort. That might be standard, but a daycare is different. It's a community service. If we displace them, we should consider the broader impact. He paused, recalling Ellie's voice explaining how children thrive on stability. "I want to explore possibilities that let the daycare continue, or at least transition smoothly." Marcus's brow furrowed, his tone turning steely. "Since when are we in the business of charity, Sanders? Have you forgotten the strategy we agreed upon at the last shareholders' meeting?" He tapped an impatient finger on the desk. "We're building a technology complex. That land is too valuable to waste on anything else." Vincent breathed deeply. The old him would have sidestepped this moral tangle by relying on the company's established protocols, but images of Paige, Lily, Noah, and Ellie filled his mind. "I'm not suggesting we cancel the project," he said, voice tight, "just that we handle it responsibly. Maybe we can find them a comparable property or build something that accommodates them." Marcus scoffed. "You're overcomplicating this. The board expects you to finalize by week's end. We won't wait any longer." He rose, straightening his suit jacket. "If you can't make tough decisions, maybe you're not the leader we thought." The challenge in his words hung in the air before he gave a curt nod and left. Vincent slumped back in his chair, a headache forming at his temples. Moments later, Diane stepped in quietly. "That sounded tense," she observed, smoothing her blouse. "Everything okay?" He closed his eyes briefly. "Marcus wants to steamroll everything. He doesn't understand the significance of that daycare." Diane placed a warm cup of tea on his desk. "People like Marcus only see numbers. They won't see how that place might be changing your daughter's life." She paused, then asked, "Have you told them how it's personal?" Vincent shook his head. "I can't. They'll think I'm compromised, and maybe I am." He blinked, mind racing. "But I won't give up. Not yet. Could you pull the historical files on that property? I recall Martha saying the house was once a community school. Maybe there's a preservation angle. Diane jotted notes. Of course. I'll see what we can dig up. She hesitated, resting a hand on Vincent's shoulder briefly. You know, Catherine would be proud you're trying to stand up for something that matters to Paige. He stared at his desk, a swirl of grief and determination surging within him. I hope so, he replied softly, watching Diane slip out. Then, setting aside the corporate facade, Vincent opened his laptop, searching for anything that might help him stall or modify the acquisition. Scrolling through old city records, he unearthed scattered references. The house's original owner, philanthropic uses, rumors of potential heritage status, but everything was incomplete, a puzzle missing pieces. He sent emails to the city planning office, hoping for a lead. He even considered contacting local activists, an unthinkable move for a CEO who normally dealt with business behind polished boardroom doors. By late afternoon, Vincent realized he'd worked straight through lunch. His stomach growled, but the hunger was overshadowed by the urgency of saving little explorers from TechVision's bulldozers. It occurred to him that he was acting more like an underdog campaigner than a powerful executive. Yet, for Paige's sake, he embraced this new role. Late in the evening, after most employees had gone home, Vincent's phone buzzed with a message from the City Archives Department. They had documents showing the house had once been named Mayfair Community School, listed in a local registry of historically significant buildings. But the listing might not be official. If he could confirm that status, TechVision would face hurdles tearing it down. Hope flickered. Vincent forwarded the email to Diane with instructions to expedite any deeper research. Stepping to the window, he gazed out at the city lights. The view, once a symbol of his ambition, now felt overshadowed by a tiny daycare on Mayfair Street. He pictured Paige giggling with her friends, and he imagined Ellie's proud smile. Compromised, Marcus had said. Perhaps Vincent was compromised by love for his daughter and a dawning respect for the spirited educator who'd given Paige a sense of belonging. But he couldn't see that as weakness. If saving little explorers meant bending corporate norms, so be it. For the first time in years, Vincent felt he had a purpose beyond profit margins, and even though he risked angering the board, he refused to betray that fragile hope building inside him. The following afternoon, Vincent found himself surrounded by tiny, improvised stage props at Little Explorers. The children were preparing a mini performance for the parents, a show and tell of what they'd learned that week. Paige, wearing a homemade paper butterfly headdress, ran up to him with excitement in her eyes. "Daddy, look!" she squealed, pointing to her painted wings. Vincent smiled, giving her a small hug. As he set her down, he heard a friendly voice behind him. "Hello there, Vincent." He turned to see Rachel, an attorney and single mother whose son, Ethan, also attended the daycare. "I've noticed you around more often lately," she said, offering a warm handshake. Rachel was in her early 40s, dressed in a casual blazer and jeans, exuding both confidence and kindness. Ethan talks about Paige. Apparently they discovered an enchanted rock together in the garden. Vincent chuckled, feeling an odd sense of belonging. Yes, Paige has been on a nature kick. She never used to care about rocks before this place. They chatted about their kids, the transformation they'd seen in them, and how the daycare's environment fostered a sense of curiosity and comfort. A tall man stepped forward, greeting them with a friendly nod. "Hi, I'm James," he said, introducing himself as another single parent. His daughter, Mia, was a spirited child who had lost her mother a year prior. "Heard you're new to the group. I've been bringing Mia here for months, and she's opened up in ways I never thought possible." Vincent was struck by James's openness about his situation. He offered a sympathetic smile, recalling his own journey of widowhood. "I'm sorry for your loss," Vincent said quietly. James nodded appreciatively. I'm taking it day by day, but Ellie and the team here are miracle workers. They helped me process a lot. Just then, Ellie clapped her hands to gather everyone's attention. The makeshift stage was set in the daycare's living room, a few chairs arranged for parents, a small table with props, and the children lined up in a row. Each child took a turn, showing off a project, papier-mâché planets, counting songs, and little dances. Paige proudly displayed a collage of painted butterflies, describing how they symbolized change. Vincent felt an unexpected lump in his throat. How apt, he thought, given the changes in his own life. After the applause died down, the parents mingled. Rachel pulled Vincent aside, curiosity brightening her dark eyes. I'm an attorney specializing in civil matters. You mentioned you're a tech vision, right? There's a real estate deal I've been hearing whispers about. Something about a property on Mayfair Street. I only ask because that's the daycare's address. Her voice had a gentle but probing edge. Vincent's heart skipped. He realized he was facing someone who could be a powerful ally or a formidable opponent if things went south. Summoning a measured tone, he nodded. Yes, Tech Vision is exploring an expansion, but nothing's finalized yet. He wondered how much he should reveal. Sensing his hesitation, Rachel nodded. It's just that parents here are worried. We keep hearing rumors about a sale that might force the daycare to close. There's already talk about trying to fight it legally if it comes to that. James approached them, overhearing the conversation. I'm no lawyer, but if they need public support, I'm in. I can't let Mia lose this place. She's found real healing here. The earnest determination in his eyes mirrored what Vincent felt. The difference was Vincent stood on both sides of the conflict, father desperate to protect his daughter's sanctuary, and CEO under pressure to finalize the sale. In that moment, Vincent realized he didn't have to carry this weight alone. Carefully, he cleared his throat. If something like that happens, you'll need a strong strategy, but let's hope it doesn't come to that. His words were deliberately vague, yet a flicker of hope touched Rachel's expression. We can form a parent group if necessary, she offered. Ellie shouldn't have to fight alone. Vincent excused himself and wandered into the hallway, grappling with the realization that the daycare community was prepared to rally. Each family had a story, like James, coping with grief, or Rachel, balancing legal work and single motherhood. For them, Little Explorers wasn't merely daycare, it was a lifeline. Paige found Vincent in the hallway, tugging at his sleeve. Daddy, are you okay? She asked, her little eyebrows knitted. Vincent forced a smile, gently ruffling her hair. I'm fine, Pumpkin, just thinking about how lucky we are to have this place. As the event wound down, Vincent stepped outside into the golden afternoon light, overhearing a snippet of conversation between Ellie and Martha. They were discussing the rent, worried about an upcoming hike. Guilt crashed into him again, but alongside it rose a determination to do something. He thought of Rachel's willingness to help and James's unwavering support. Perhaps, in this place of unexpected friendships, he could find the allies he needed to protect Little Explorers. He left with new resolve, clutching Paige's butterfly artwork like a quiet promise. Allies had indeed surfaced, and though he wasn't ready to reveal the whole truth, he felt less alone in the battle that lay ahead. All he needed now was the courage to share what he knew and stand against the corporate juggernaut pushing forward, his own company, Tech Vision. Less than a week after the children's presentation, tension hit a breaking point. Ellie received a certified letter from a real estate agent confirming the impending sale of the property. She carefully read it in her office, hands trembling. Outside, the daycare bustled with laughter, but inside, Ellie's heart sank. If the sale went through, little explorers would be forced to vacate within 6 months. She decided she couldn't keep this development to herself. Vincent arrived in the late afternoon to pick up Paige. He sensed Ellie's distress immediately. Instead of the usual friendly greeting, she summoned him into her small office, where the vibrant paintings on the walls clashed with the grim tension in the air. She handed him the letter without preamble, pressing her lips into a taut line. Vincent scanned the words, feeling the dread coil in his stomach. He had known this was coming, but seeing it in black and white made it painfully real. "We need to talk," Ellie said quietly. "I did some research. The buyer is listed as Mayfair Investments, LLC, but it's a shell company. The real beneficiary is TechVision, which means you." Her voice cracked slightly, but her eyes were resolute. "Were you ever going to tell me, Vincent?" He exhaled, shoulders slumping. "Ellie, it's not that simple, Matt. I only realized the property was connected to TechVision after Paige started coming here." He hesitated, wanting to explain, but the look of betrayal on Ellie's face cut him to the core. I've been trying to find a solution that doesn't close this place. I haven't signed off on anything final. I've even tried to stall the deal." Her cheeks flushed with anger. "So that's why you kept asking questions about the building's history? And why you lingered around like you cared about our programs? You were gathering intel." Vincent opened his mouth to protest, but Ellie pressed on. "I thought you wanted to understand the children's growth, but you were just a corporate spy in fancy suits." Paige's muffled laughter drifted from the next room, a cruel reminder of the stakes. "That's not fair," Vincent managed, voice low. "When I first came, yes, I was oblivious. But then I saw how much Paige loves it here, how important it is to these kids. I've been fighting from inside TechVision to spare this property, but it's an uphill battle." Ellie's eyes brimmed with tears, though she refused to let them fall. "You should have told me, Vincent. Do you know how humiliating it feels to learn from a legal notice that the man I was beginning to trust is actually behind the buyout?" She shook her head, stepping around her desk to create distance. "I can't trust anything you say now. My staff, the kids, even Martha, we've all been in the dark while you balanced your corporate obligations with your newfound conscience." He tried to approach, but Ellie's posture radiated heartbreak and betrayal. "I'm sorry," he said, voice tight with regret. "I was afraid you'd shut me out, or that you'd think I was the enemy. I wanted to fix it first, to show you I cared." He rubbed a trembling hand across his jaw. "Please believe me, I never intended to hurt anyone here." Ellie's silence was more damning than any words. Finally, she gestured toward the door. "I need time to process this. You should go." Vincent hesitated, his mind screaming with pleas to stay, to convince her of his sincerity, but her gaze hardened, and he understood there was no salvaging this moment. He turned and left, feeling Paige's small hand slip into his at the threshold. She looked up, sensing the charged atmosphere. "Daddy, why is Ellie upset?" Paige whispered. Vincent couldn't find a simple answer. He led her outside, his heart pounding with guilt and frustration. He buckled Paige into the car, his mind replaying Ellie's hurt expression. This was exactly what he'd feared, a chasm opening between him and the people he'd grown to care about. The next morning, Vincent attempted to call Ellie, but she didn't answer. He sent messages explaining he had no intention of closing the daycare, begging for a chance to talk face to face. No response. Meanwhile, an email from Marcus lit up his inbox, demanding an urgent meeting. The board wanted to finalize the purchase by next week, no more delays. As Vincent stared at his reflection in the polished office window, he saw a man unmoored. He was the CEO of a powerful tech company, yet powerless to mend the breach he'd caused with Ellie. Paige's happiness teetered on the brink of being snatched away. The warm connection he'd built with the daycare community now threatened to crumble under corporate demands. Vincent felt a weight settle on his chest as he realized the full consequence of his choices. He had tried to keep secrets, to preserve control, yet the truth was out, leaving him exposed and Ellie devastated. And so he braced himself for the inevitable storm, knowing that his next moves would define not just his career, but his relationship with Paige and the fragile trust he'd fought to earn at Little Explorers. Vincent stared at his reflection in the windows of his penthouse E, the Seattle skyline glittering behind him. A late-night drizzle streaked the glass. It felt like a somber chorus to the storm of regret in his chest. He'd spent hours calling and texting Ellie after she'd discovered TechVision's role in the looming sale, but her phone went straight to voicemail. On his desk lay a stack of papers from Marcus demanding he finalize the acquisition that threatened to destroy Little Explorers. How had he let things spiral so far? He ran a hand over his face and turned to check on Paige, who had already gone to bed in her pink-canopied room. The hush in the apartment, broken only by the distant hum of the city, seemed heavier tonight. In the kitchen, he found himself pacing, recalling how Ellie's voice had wavered with betrayal when she confronted him. Paige had been so happy at that daycare, and now Vincent was the reason she might lose it. Exhaustion weighed on him like a lead blanket. Morning arrived too soon. Vincent dressed in a slightly rumpled suit, skipping his usual meticulous grooming. He drove Paige to Little Explorers in silence. The child's usual chatter felt muted, perhaps sensing her father's turmoil. When he pulled up at the Victorian house, Ellie was nowhere to be seen. Noah, the assistant teacher, greeted Paige at the front gate with a sympathetic half-smile. Vincent asked about Ellie, but Noah only shrugged. "She said she'd be in later," he murmured, not meeting Vincent's eyes. Before leaving, Vincent crouched down to hug Paige. "I'll pick you up early, okay?" Paige merely nodded, hugging her bunny, worry etched on her small face. With a pang of guilt, Vincent realized that, until recently, Paige never questioned his decisions. Now, after witnessing the tension with Ellie, she seemed uneasy. He hated being the cause of that uncertainty. At TechVision, the day began with a tense board meeting. Marcus launched into a tirade about deadlines, potential losses, and the need to close Mayfair fast. Vincent scanned the faces around the table. Some members looked impatient, others distracted. None of them seemed concerned about the families who relied on the daycare, an intangible that didn't show up on profit and loss statements. As the meeting ended, Marcus cornered Vincent in the hallway. "Don't make this personal," he warned. "You're the CEO." "Start acting like it." Vincent's jaw tightened. How could he make them understand the difference this place was making for his daughter and so many others? He retreated to his office, ignoring the calls piling up. Slumping into his chair, he thought of the promise he'd made to Catherine to keep Paige safe and happy. That vow felt irreconcilable now with his corporate obligations. His phone lit up with a message from Diane. "Urgent. We need to talk." Moments later, Diane walked in, closing the door behind her. She held a folder labeled Little Explorers Property. "I compiled everything you asked for," she said softly. "Historical registrations, mortgage records, some leads on how the property might gain historical status." She paused, sympathy in her eyes. "Vincent, the board's pushing for a final signature, but there are ways you could stall. We just have to be strategic." Vincent opened the folder, scanning old photos and legal disclaimers. The building had once served as a community school in the 1950s. Although the formal historical designation process was never completed, it could be reopened with the proper documents. A footnote indicated that, with enough local support, the building could be protected or at least recognized as historically relevant, complicating demolition permits. A spark of hope flared within him. If he could leverage this, maybe there was a path to save the daycare without outright defying the board. At least, not yet. "What's my window?" he asked. "Marcus wants the acquisition wrapped up in days." Diane folded her arms. "It won't be easy. Historical designations can take time, sometimes months. But if the city sees the community rally, they might expedite certain steps." "You're essentially fighting your own corporation, though." Vincent swallowed hard. "I know," he said, voice rough, "and Ellie won't even speak to me right now." Diane offered him a measured look. "Then maybe you need to show her, not just tell her, that you're on her side." As she left, Vincent stared at the old photographs. Families once gathered at that very property, children running free in the same yard where Paige now played. The parallels were uncanny. Hours later, Vincent found himself at the daycare again. He arrived early, heart pounding. Paige was in the backyard, painting wooden flower pots with Miguel and Lily, while Noah supervised. Ellie hovered near the fence, speaking quietly with Martha. Vincent approached, but Ellie's shoulders stiffened. Her eyes flicked to him, then away. Taking a breath, he stepped forward. "Ellie, we can't leave things like this. Please, let's talk." She shook her head, tears gleaming in her eyes. "Not now. I can't do this in front of the kids, and I'm not sure what else there is to say." Martha gently touched Ellie's arm, trying to calm her. Vincent noticed the lines of worry etched across Martha's weathered face. "Ellie," he pressed, "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I'm trying to save this place." Ellie's lip trembled, but she looked away. Paige glanced up, sensing the tension. Vincent's heart sank. He knew each passing moment strained Ellie's ability to trust him. Unable to resolve the conflict in that tense setting, Vincent left with Paige, feeling the consequences of his choices weigh ever heavier. He realized that saving little explorers would demand more than half measures or secret legal maneuvers. It would require a full-on stand against the machine of corporate momentum and an honest, open gesture that might mend Ellie's faith in him before it was too late. That night, Vincent sat at his dining table long after Paige had gone to bed, staring at an open photo album. Moonlight filtered through the expansive windows, illuminating pictures of Catherine. In one snapshot, she was sitting on a bench in the very house they once owned, cradling an infant Paige. In another, she was smiling broadly, hair windswept, on a family vacation at the coast. Her presence was so vivid in these images that Vincent almost heard her laughter echo through the silent penthouse. He hadn't allowed himself to linger on these memories in ages. After Catherine's death, he'd buried his grief under layers of work, focusing on Tech Vision's meteoric rise. But tonight, raw emotions flooded him. He flicked through the pages until he found one of Catherine's handwritten notes, little affirmations she used to scribble on pastel-colored paper. This one read, "Remember to let Paige discover her own world. Vincent, don't shield her from life's colors." He traced the words with a trembling finger, recalling how Catherine believed in a more open, adventurous approach to parenting. He sighed, pulling an old box from a nearby shelf. Inside were items he'd stashed away after the funeral, a few of Catherine's personal journals, love letters, even a short manifesto she once wrote about creating a children's foundation. At the time, Vincent found it sweet but unrealistic. Now, reading her vision for helping underprivileged kids gain educational opportunities, he felt an ache. Had he, in his grief, strayed from her ideals? He read a line that struck him: "If we ever have the means, we should invest in places that let children be children, where curiosity flourishes." Tears burned at the corners of his eyes. Catherine's dream aligned eerily with the spirit of Little Explorers. She would have loved Ellie's methodology, the freedom of exploration, the emotional nurturing. Setting the papers aside, Vincent leaned back, mind swirling. Catherine's voice, even in memory, urged him to do more than chase corporate success. She'd wanted Paige to grow up in a world where she could laugh freely, embrace her own interests, and learn compassion. Everything Paige was finally beginning to do at Ellie's daycare. His thoughts drifted to the property acquisition. He pictured the bulldozers, the corporate ceremony, TechVision's triumphant expansion on Mayfair Street. A stark contrast to the warmth of the daycare's backyard. Anguish gnawed at him. Could he bear to sign the dotted line, knowing it would crush Catherine's dream and Paige's newfound joy? Looking around the immaculate penthouse, he realized he'd built a prison of controlled emptiness. For 2 years, his life had revolved around the next big deal, the next shareholder meeting, the next stock surge. But in this pursuit, he'd nearly lost the ability to recognize what truly mattered. Paige's small voice echoed in his mind. "Daddy, can I go back to the colorful house?" The child's innocent question carried so much weight now. It was about more than just a daycare. It was about the vision Catherine had once shared with him. A gentle knock on the door frame startled him. Paige stood there in her pajamas, bunny in hand. "Daddy, I couldn't sleep." Vincent quickly shut the album, not wanting to upset her with tears. He guided her to the sofa and pulled her onto his lap. She nestled close, her eyes drooping. "Do you miss Mommy?" she asked quietly, as though sensing his thoughts. Vincent's throat constricted. "Yes, sweetheart, I do," he whispered, stroking her hair. "She loved you very much." Paige fiddled with the bunny's ear. "I miss her too. Sometimes I don't remember her face." Vincent swallowed the lump in his throat, pressing her to his chest. They sat in a hush for a while. Finally, Paige yawned. "I liked hearing about her. She seemed happy," she said softly. Vincent kissed the top of her head. "She was, and she wanted you to be happy, more than anything." He gazed around the sleek living room. "I think she'd want us to make choices that help other children be happy too." Paige's eyes fluttered closed, and she drifted off in his arms. Carefully, Vincent carried her back to bed, tucking her in with the same tenderness he once saw in Catherine's every action. Standing there, he resolved that perhaps it was time to honor his wife's memory in a tangible way, by defending a place that embodied the kind of nurturing, open education Catherine had dreamed of. In the quiet moments afterward, Vincent didn't return to business spreadsheets or property contracts, and instead, he reopened Catherine's journal, reading through her ideas on educational outreach. As the night wore on, he formulated a plan, one that might risk his standing at TechVision, but could preserve the promise of little explorers. Catherine's voice seemed to echo in his heart. Let Paige discover her own world, and maybe help other children discover theirs too. The next morning, Vincent wore a grim expression as he entered TechVision's boardroom. He'd hardly slept, yet the swirling mix of grief and determination fueled him. The board members, including Marcus, were already seated around the long polished table, laptops open, and a hush of expectancy in the air. Clearing his throat, Vincent began the day's discussion with routine updates. Then came the inevitable topic, finalizing the Mayfair Street property. A wave of tension swept the room. Marcus wasted no time. "We have the documents ready," he said, tapping a thick folder. "All that's needed is your signature, Sanders." Vincent sat up straighter, steeling himself. "I'd like to request an extension," he said calmly. The surprise around the table was palpable, murmurs and raised eyebrows. He continued, "I believe there are unresolved community impact issues we need to address before we close. Specifically, the daycare operating on site." Marcus leaned forward, his frustration barely concealed. "We've been through this. They'll be compensated. This is standard procedure. We don't let sentimentality derail progress. His tone carried a razor edge, challenging Vincent to argue further. Vincent took a controlled breath. Sentimentality? We're talking about children, families, and a long-standing community fixture. The negative press, if we bulldoze a daycare, is hardly beneficial for our brand. He'd practiced this line, framing it as a strategic concern rather than pure emotion. We risk a PR debacle if we proceed without caution. I'm asking for a short delay to explore alternatives. The room buzzed with quiet debate. Some members glanced at each other, considering the potential fallout. Marcus, however, scowled openly. Enough. We've wasted too much time as it is. I'm calling for a vote. He stood, crossing his arms over his chest, all in favor of finalizing the purchase immediately. Hands rose around the table, though several hesitated, glancing at Vincent uncertainly. Vincent's heart pounded. He realized this might be the moment he lost control over the deal and the future of little explorers. Pressing his lips tight, he said, "If this board insists on rushing forward without exploring solutions, I may have to step away from my position as CEO." A shocked hush fell. Diane, who stood near the back of the room, clutched her tablet closer, eyes widening. Marcus's mouth opened in disbelief before he sputtered, "Are you threatening to resign over a small daycare? That's absurd. You're too deeply vested in tech vision to walk away." Vincent met his gaze evenly. "Try me," he replied. "I built tech vision from scratch, but I won't let it compromise my values. We've always promoted ourselves as a forward-thinking, socially conscious brand. This is a chance to prove it." His voice echoed in the tense silence. Marcus's nostrils flared. The board members shifted in their seats, some exchanging uncertain glances. Vincent realized they might not want a public clash that ends with Tech Vision's founding CEO resigning over a moral stand. The optics would be terrible, worse, perhaps, than a delayed property deal. One of the older board members, a woman named Susan, cleared her throat. "Marcus, perhaps we can afford a brief investigation into alternatives. It wouldn't hurt to mitigate potential public outcry." And Vincent, she turned to him with a measured look, "I assume you have a proposal in mind that isn't just indefinite postponement." Vincent nodded, relief flickering inside him. "Yes, I do. Give me a month. In that time, I'll determine if we can preserve the daycare or relocate it with minimal harm." He paused, glancing at Diane, who offered a supportive nod. "And if we can secure any historical designation or philanthropic angle, Tech Vision could even benefit from tax incentives and a positive image. It's win-win if we handle this right." Marcus's eyes narrowed, but he sensed the shifting mood. Leaning on cold logic and brand reputation, Vincent had found a foothold. "Fine," Marcus ground out. "You have 30 days, but if you fail, we sign the contract. No more excuses. Understood?" "Understood," Vincent said, voice firm. The tension in his shoulders eased slightly. He'd bought time, but it wasn't a victory yet. He had 1 month to find a miracle that would save little explorers without tanking Tech Vision. After the meeting, Vincent collapsed into his office chair, adrenaline still pumping. Diane appeared, quietly closing the door behind her. "You really threatened to quit?" she asked, eyes alight with a mix of astonishment and admiration. Vincent let out a shaky sigh. "I did. I can't let them steamroll that place. Paige. She's the only reason I'm even thinking this way. I owe it to her. And to Catherine." Diane nodded. "Well, you got your month. What's your plan?" Vincent rubbed his temples. "I'll figure it out as I go. For starters, I need to talk to Martha about the property's finances, and maybe approach the city for a historical classification. But I also need Ellie on board. Without her cooperation, I can't get community support." Diane squeezed his shoulder. "Then you should start by making amends with Ellie, genuinely." If she still sees you as the enemy, none of this will work. Vincent exhaled, bracing himself. Winning back Ellie's trust felt even more daunting than stalling a multinational corporation, but he knew he had no choice. There was too much at stake, for Paige, for the daycare, and for the memory of the woman he'd once promised to honor above all else. Vincent waited in his Range Rover outside Little Explorers, his gaze scanning the colorful yard. It was late afternoon, and most parents had already collected their children. He'd deliberately arrived at this quieter hour, hoping Ellie might be open to conversation. Finally, she emerged, guiding a young boy out to his mother's car. Spotting Vincent, her demeanor instantly stiffened. He stepped out and walked over, hands raised in a peaceful gesture. "Ellie, please, give me a few minutes," he murmured. She looked away, shoulders tense. "If it's about the daycare, I have nothing to say," she replied, though she didn't walk off. Vincent seized the moment. "I fought the board this morning," he began, voice subdued. "I risked my position to get an extension on the property deal. We have a month to find a way to save this place." Ellie's expression flickered with surprise, but her guard remained up. "I don't need your corporate charity," she snapped. "We'll figure it out on our own." "We've been doing that long before you showed up." Vincent nodded, accepting the frustration in her tone. "I understand, but I don't want to be your enemy. My daughter, she's thriving here, and I believe in what you do." Hesitating, he added, "I also saw how much this place matters to Martha. She told me about its history, how it was once a community school founded by her mother." Ellie's gaze softened slightly at the mention of Martha. "Yes, that's true. Martha's mother made it her life's work to support kids in this neighborhood." Sighing, Ellie folded her arms. "I'm trying to carry that legacy forward, but we've been struggling financially. The rent keeps going up, and donations aren't enough to renovate or expand. We've never had a surplus, but we always found a way, until now." Vincent dared a small step closer, "Which is why I need to talk to Martha. If we can restructure ownership or leverage historical preservation, we might protect the property from being sold." He paused, voice quieter. "I can't do that effectively without your help. Please." Ellie studied him for a long moment. He looked different, tired, perhaps genuinely remorseful. "Fine," she said at last, exhaling in defeat. "She's inside, sorting art supplies." "But don't expect me to suddenly forgive everything." Vincent nodded, relief coursing through him. "I understand." Inside, the daycare was unusually silent. The walls still displayed bright artwork, but the cheerful chatter of children had faded. Martha was perched on a small chair near a table piled with construction paper. She smiled at Vincent's approach, though her eyes held a hint of sadness. "So, you've come back," she said, arching a brow. "I figured after Ellie learned the truth, we'd seen the last of you." Vincent bowed his head. "I'm not proud of keeping secrets, but I'm trying to make it right. The board gave me a month to propose an alternative plan. Martha, is there any chance you'd consider selling the property to someone who would preserve the daycare? Maybe a charitable foundation?" Martha placed a stack of papers aside. "Selling has been my only recourse because of my financial situation. I'm getting older, my health isn't the best, and I can't keep up with costly repairs. TechVision's offer was significant enough to secure my future." A wistful look crossed her face. "I've worried every day about what would happen to Ellie and the children if I sold, but I saw no other way." Vincent eased himself into a tiny chair, meeting her gaze earnestly. "I understand your position. But what if we formed a foundation that could purchase the property or pay you enough for your retirement while preserving the daycare? We could name it in honor of your family's legacy, or even after someone dear to me." He thought of Catherine, imagining a foundation that embodied her ideals. Ellie hovered behind them, arms crossed. Even if such a foundation existed, how would you fund it? The purchase price is steep, and TechVision's board won't just hand out money for philanthropic gestures. Vincent pursed his lips. I have some resources of my own, separate from TechVision. And if I can demonstrate to certain board members that retaining this property as a community space offers tax breaks and positive publicity, they might approve partial sponsorship. Besides, if the city designates it as historically significant, the land's value changes in complex ways. We can't simply bulldoze it. Martha gazed at him, hope flickering in her eyes. It's risky, she whispered. But if you truly mean to keep the daycare open, I'd prefer that over selling to a faceless corporation. This house has always been meant for children. A moment of silence followed. Ellie's posture remained guarded, but she no longer looked ready to dismiss Vincent outright. You really think you can do this in a month? She asked, skepticism evident. Vincent released a breath. I'm going to try. Martha set down a box of markers, rubbing her palms together. Then let's talk numbers. What I need, what you can offer, and how we handle repairs. Turning to Ellie, she added, we'll need your input on expansions or improvements. Ellie hesitated, clearly torn between caution and longing. Finally, she sighed. I'll cooperate for the kids' sake and Paige's, but Vincent, she fixed him with a firm stare. If you break this promise, I'll never forgive you. Vincent felt the weight of her words. I understand, he said quietly. I won't let you down. Over the next hour, they combed through finances, maintenance lists, and possible timelines. As the conversation progressed, Vincent realized how much they all wanted the same outcome, a safe haven for the children. Yet behind Ellie's cautious manner, he sensed the same question lingering. Could he truly stand against his own corporation to protect a place that had captured his heart and his daughter's spirit? Vincent pulled another late night in his home office. A sea of papers spread across his sleek glass desk. Paige was already in bed, and the city lights twinkled beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. Yet his focus remained on the files, legal documents, projected budgets for a hypothetical foundation, and the historical records Diane had sent him. It was daunting. He had 30 days to craft a proposal that would convince TechVision's board and secure Martha's willingness to sell under new terms. He paused, remembering how, hours earlier, Ellie had reluctantly agreed to share some practical ideas for upgrading the daycare if it remained standing. The memory of her guarded eyes stung him. He could sense she wanted to trust him, but her hurt ran deep. If he failed now, he might lose not only little explorers, but also the fragile bond forming between them. Tapping on his laptop, Vincent opened a video conference with Jeremy Foster, TechVision's Director of Corporate Social Responsibility. Jeremy was a middle-aged man with gentle eyes and a warm demeanor, known for championing charitable endeavors within the company. He appeared on screen with a curious smile. Vincent, it's late. You finally decided to chat about the rumor I've heard regarding a daycare deal. Vincent let out a tension-filled chuckle. Indeed. Thanks for making time. We need TechVision's philanthropic angle on something. Over the next half hour, Vincent laid out a rough plan, a philanthropic branch that could partner with local government grants, maintain the historical building, and keep little explorers active. Jeremy nodded thoughtfully, occasionally interrupting with clarifying questions. By the end, he looked impressed but wary. This is ambitious, he said, leaning back in his chair. Marcus won't be thrilled. But from a CSR standpoint, it could be a win if pitched correctly. Vincent offered a faint smile. I only need enough board members to see the long-term benefits. Reduced taxes, positive press, workforce morale. If it positions TechVision as a community hero, maybe they'll swallow the short-term costs. Jeremy agreed, to help prepare a polished presentation that could sway the more open-minded shareholders. After the call ended, Vincent massaged his temples. He realized he still needed local support from the neighborhood. The more community backing they had, the stronger the argument for preserving the property. That's where Rachel the attorney could come in. She could organize parents to gather signatures, contact city council members, and expedite any historical designation process. The next morning, Vincent arranged a meeting with Rachel at a nearby coffee shop. He arrived to find her in a cozy corner, phone in hand, scanning legal briefs. She greeted him with cautious optimism. "I have to say, I was surprised you reached out. Ellie told me you're trying to save the daycare from tech vision." Her tone implied she wasn't entirely sure of his motives. Vincent explained his strategy: stalling the sale, establishing a foundation or philanthropic arm under tech vision, and using the property's historical potential to secure city protections. Rachel studied him over the rim of her coffee cup. "This is complicated, but not impossible," she mused. "Do you have the board's backing?" "Not fully. Marcus gave me 30 days to deliver a compelling plan, or they'll sign anyway," Vincent admitted. Rachel's eyes narrowed. "Then we need public pressure. If a sizable group of parents, neighbors, and maybe the local press support the daycare's significance, the board will have to reconsider. Let's file a motion to the city for historical preservation, push it through quickly. Meanwhile, we organize parents to sign petitions and speak at city council meetings." Vincent nodded, his spirits lifting. "Perfect. I'll have Jeremy help with the corporate side, and you can rally the community side." Their conversation then shifted to logistics, how to phrase the petition, which local officials might be sympathetic, and how to handle media outreach. By the end of the hour, Vincent felt an unexpected surge of hope. For once, he wasn't alone in this fight. He returned to Little Explorers at pickup time, finding Paige helping Ellie stack plastic chairs. The tension between Ellie and Vincent remained, but when he mentioned the plan, community petitions, historical status, and a philanthropic pitch, Ellie allowed a small nod. "If this means we don't have to shut down, I'll cooperate," she said carefully. "Just don't feed me false hope." Vincent exhaled, meeting her gaze. "I promise. I'm all in. Give me a chance to prove it." He felt Paige tug his sleeve, her eyes shining with curiosity. "Daddy, are you helping my school?" He ruffled her hair gently. "Yes, sweetie, I'm trying." They exited together, stepping out into the late afternoon sunshine. Vincent realized that, despite the daunting work ahead, he felt more alive than he had in years. He was fighting not only for a building, but for the ideals Catherine had once written in her journal, creating a space where children could flourish, where they felt loved and free. As he drove away, Vincent glanced in the rearview mirror at Paige, who contentedly hummed a tune from the daycare's morning music circle. The warmth that spread through him chased away lingering doubts. He had an actual strategy, a team of allies, and the will to see it through. Now the biggest question loomed. Would it be enough to overcome corporate inertia, mend the rift with Ellie, and preserve the haven that Paige and so many other children had grown to call home? Vincent stood at the head of TechVision's towering conference room, a flurry of nervous energy coursing through him. Spread across the oval table were neatly arranged binders, each containing the alternative proposal he and Jeremy Foster had assembled over countless late nights. Every board member, including Marcus Blackwood, eyed the documents with a mixture of skepticism and curiosity. Clearing his throat, Vincent began, "Thank you all for attending this special session. I realize we're at a critical juncture. Today, I'll present a plan to preserve the Mayfair Street property, specifically the Little Explorers Daycare, through a philanthropic initiative under TechVision's umbrella." From the corner, Diane nodded encouragingly. Marcus, however, wore a razor-thin smile. "We're listening," he said, arms folded. Vincent launched into the presentation, highlighting how the property had historical value, community support, and the potential to foster positive press for TechVision. He detailed prospective tax incentives, government grants for heritage sites, and philanthropic benefits that could help the company align with its touted vision of social responsibility. Slides showcased photos of smiling children at the daycare, as well as testimonials from neighborhood parents who credited Little Explorers with improving their kids' emotional well-being. Throughout Vincent's speech, the atmosphere teetered between cautious interest and corporate cynicism. Some board members appeared moved, flipping pages and jotting notes. Others, loyal to Marcus, looked unconvinced. Finally, Vincent pulled up a slide revealing the proposed name for the new philanthropic branch, the Catherine Sanders Foundation, named in honor of his late wife's passion for education. He paused, swallowing the lump in his throat. Catherine believed in making opportunities accessible to every child. This foundation would uphold that principle. A silence weighed on the room until Marcus broke it with a disparaging chuckle. "A sentimental gesture," he remarked, voice cutting. "Tell me, Sanders, have you run the numbers on how long it'll take for this new foundation to become profitable, if it ever does? Or should we just accept bleeding money indefinitely?" Vincent expected the question. "I'm aware we'll carry some short-term costs," he replied, voice steady. "But we've prepared a phased approach. TechVision's core revenue streams remain untouched. In fact, a successful philanthropic arm can enhance brand loyalty and bring in strategic partnerships that yield long-term gains. It's not purely altruistic, there's mutual benefit for our company and the community." Marcus's eyes flashed with impatience. "And if it fails, we're left holding a worthless property that can't be developed for higher profit." He gestured to the board. "This is an unnecessary risk. We've had a solid plan from the start: acquire Mayfair Street, build the new tech hub, and boost shareholder value." Susan, the older board member who had supported Vincent before, tentatively raised her hand. "Mr. Blackwood, you can't ignore the negative PR if we shutter a thriving daycare, especially in Seattle's current climate. Plus," she added, pointing to a bar graph in Vincent's materials, "there's reason to believe a philanthropic endeavor could offset costs through public grants. Vincent's outlined potential city funds if the property gains historical status." Marcus's lips pressed into a thin line. He turned to Vincent. "You're asking us to bet on public sentiment." Vincent inhaled slowly, glancing toward Diane, who offered a silent nod of reassurance. "Yes, I am. I've watched the community rally. We already have petitions with hundreds of signatures and local media interest. Our brand is about innovation. Why not innovate in our approach to corporate responsibility?" the board members murmured among themselves. Sensing the shift, Marcus attacked with renewed vigor. "Don't forget, the reason we even reconsidered was because you threatened to resign. So tell us, Vincent, if we reject this plan, are you still prepared to walk away from the company you built?" A tense hush followed. Vincent's pulse throbbed in his temples. He locked eyes with Marcus. "I'd do whatever necessary to protect Little Explorers and stand by my daughter," he said resolutely. "I don't want to resign, but I won't compromise on this." Marcus stood, bristling. "Fine. Let's see how much faith our colleagues truly have in you." He called for a formal vote of confidence in Vincent's leadership. His intention was clear: force the board to choose between supporting Vincent's vision or siding with Marcus's more profitable plan. The outcome wasn't immediate. Some members requested a short recess to discuss specifics privately. Diane approached Vincent as whispering, "You did well, but Marcus has been lobbying against you." "Be prepared for anything. Vincent forced a tight smile. The final decision hung on a knife's edge, and he knew Marcus was hoping to sway enough votes to either kill the Foundation idea or dethrone him entirely. If the board sided with Marcus, Tech Vision would proceed with tearing down the daycare. If they sided with Vincent, he'd have the mandate to save little explorers, but would be under immense pressure to prove his plan financially sound. With the board members set to reconvene in an hour, Vincent left the conference room, heart pounding. He glanced at a photo in his wallet, Catherine holding a tiny Paige, both smiling as bright as the morning sun. Quietly, he whispered, "Wish me luck." In the hallway's stillness, he steeled himself for the next stage of the conflict, determined not to let fear overshadow his conviction to protect the children's sanctuary. 2 days passed, and the board remained deadlocked. Some members leaned toward Vincent's vision for a philanthropic initiative, while others insisted on Marcus's quick profit strategy. The tension had reached a fever pitch, prompting Vincent to take Paige away for a weekend at his coastal cottage. An underused property he hadn't visited since Catherine's passing. He needed space to think, and Paige needed a break from the undercurrent of anxiety in their home. They arrived late on Friday. The small wooden cottage perched near a rocky shoreline, where the Pacific's crashing waves provided a soothing lullaby. The place smelled of cedar and carried memories of simpler times. When Catherine was alive, they spent weekends here, walking the beach at dawn, collecting shells, and imagining the future with bright optimism. Now, as Vincent unlocked the door, he hesitated. A fine layer of dust coated the furniture. Faded photographs still hung on the walls, pictures of Paige as a toddler, Catherine building sandcastles, family barbecues on the deck. Paige wandered in, eyes wide. "Daddy, I don't remember this place," she said, holding her stuffed rabbit. "When were we here last?" Vincent swallowed hard, setting their bags down. "It's been a while, sweetheart." "Mommy loved it here." Paige nodded, glancing toward a photo on the side table, a snapshot of Catherine, hair blowing in the sea breeze, flashing a radiant smile. For a moment, Paige's hand hovered near the picture. "She looks so happy," she whispered. Vincent felt a pang of longing. "She was," he murmured, carefully placing a hand on Paige's shoulder. Determined to create new memories, Vincent suggested an evening walk on the beach. They stepped onto the sand just as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in streaks of orange and pink. Paige ran ahead, giggling at the sensation of sand between her toes. Vincent trailed behind, hands in his jacket pockets, mind churning with conflicting thoughts about Tech Vision, Marcus, Ellie, and this precarious plan to save little explorers. Soon, Paige returned with a tiny shell, holding it out proudly. "Look, it's shaped like a little heart," she exclaimed. Vincent examined the shell, noticing the heart-like curve. "That's beautiful," he said, smiling. Paige's excitement was infectious, and he felt some of his tension melt away. For a moment, he allowed himself to just be a father, not a CEO juggling a corporate standoff. Back at the cottage, they prepared a simple dinner of grilled cheese sandwiches. The small kitchen filled with the comforting aroma of melted butter. Paige chattered about the daycare's latest activities, how Noah helped them create a mini volcano experiment, how Lily painted a mural with surprising skill, and how Ellie taught them all a new sing-along about marine life. Vincent listened intently, heart swelling with gratitude for how much Ellie had contributed to Paige's happiness. After dinner, he tucked Paige into the guest bedroom. She insisted on playing ocean sounds on a small speaker she found in the corner. Soon, her eyelids drooped, and she drifted to sleep amidst the soft crash of waves. Vincent lingered in the doorway, remembering how Catherine used to read Paige bedtime stories about mermaids and sea adventures whenever they stayed here. When Paige was finally asleep, Vincent slipped outside, settling on an old wooden bench overlooking the dark water. The salt air tingled on his skin, the moon casting a pale glow on the waves. He pulled out his phone, skimming the emails he'd missed. One stood out from Diane, subject line, "Board decision delayed." He sighed in relief, learning they had postponed the vote of confidence until next week, buying him a few more days to rally support. Another email from Jeremy confirmed positive feedback from local media, who were intrigued by TechVision's philanthropic pivot. Vincent set the phone aside, gazing at the moon's reflection on the water. He felt torn between the corporate realm where he'd always thrived and this quieter, more authentic life that beckoned him. Catherine's voice echoed in his memory, reminding him to prioritize love, compassion, and shared joy. Here, in the hush of the seaside, those principles felt more real than ever. Half an hour later, he noticed Paige's silhouette in the cottage doorway. She padded over in her pajamas, eyes drowsy. "Couldn't sleep," she whispered. Vincent lifted her into his lap on the bench. Together, they watched the rhythmic surf. "Daddy," Paige said softly, "I miss Mommy. I know you do too." His throat tightened. "Yeah, I do. Every day," he admitted. Paige snuggled closer. "Do you think she'd like my daycare?" she asked. Vincent pressed a tender kiss to her head. "I know she would." She cared so much about children being free to explore and learn. As the night wore on, father and daughter clung to each other under the moon's gentle glow. Despite the uncertainty waiting for them back in Seattle, Vincent felt a sense of clarity forming. He couldn't abandon the fight for little explorers, not just for Paige, but for the ideals Catherine had cherished. In the morning, he would drive back revitalized, ready to face the board, the press, and even Ellie's lingering doubts. For now, he savored this moment of reflection, inhaling the tang of salty air and relishing the love that bound him to the legacy of the woman they both missed so dearly. Vincent returned to Seattle a day early, invigorated by the weekend's peaceful interlude. He woke Monday morning with an unusual sense of calm. Instead of his usual designer suit, he chose a pair of dark jeans and a simple button-down shirt. He even left his Italian leather shoes in the closet, opting for comfortable loafers. The mirror reflected a man drastically different from the corporate titan who once prized control above all else. After dropping Paige off at Little Explorers, he stepped out of his Range Rover and hesitated. Typically, he would rush off to TechVision, but something compelled him to linger. The morning air was fresh, the sun throwing warm rays on the daycare's brightly painted facade. He walked around the side, where a small garden plot lay ready for planting. He found Ellie there, wearing overalls and gloves, crouched as she dug into the soil. She glanced up when his shadow fell across the neat rows. Surprise flickered in her eyes at his casual outfit. Vincent Sanders usually came decked in impeccable suits. He offered a tentative smile. "Good morning. Need any help?" She looked uncertain, pausing her work. "I won't say no. The kids will be out soon and we're teaching them how to plant herbs." With cautious acceptance, she handed him a spare pair of gloves and demonstrated how to prepare the soil. They worked in near silence at first. Vincent noted the gentle breeze ruffling Ellie's red curls, the earthy smell of turned soil, and the distant chirps of sparrows. The tension between them felt subdued, not gone, but softened by the shared task. Finally, he spoke. "I took Paige to our beach cottage. She'd never been old enough to remember it. It was good to reconnect." Ellie nodded, pressing a small basil seedling into the soil. "Paige told me she had fun," she said quietly. "I'm glad. She's smiling more each day." Vincent swallowed, focusing on the seedling in his hand. "Ellie, I know I've caused a lot of stress. I can't change the past, but I promise I'm fully committed to saving Little Explorers. We have more community signatures, the local paper is covering the story, and the board vote is delayed." This is our window. Sitting back on her heels, Ellie surveyed him. His open collar and rumpled shirt told her he was indeed different. "I see how hard you're trying," she admitted, "but part of me is still afraid to trust you. Each time I start to believe you care, I remember you're the CEO of the very company threatening to shut us down." His chest tightened. "I understand. If I were in your position, I'd feel the same. All I ask is that you don't give up on me yet." He hesitated, then added softly, "Please." Before Ellie could answer, the gate burst open, and a parade of children hustled in, Paige among them, along with Lily, Miguel, and Ethan. Noah followed, distributing small trowels. The moment for quiet conversation ended, replaced by excited giggles as the kids gathered around. Ellie took a centering breath. "All right, everyone, find a spot. We're planting basil, mint, and oregano today." Vincent watched as Paige plunged her hands into the dirt, beaming when she found a wriggling earthworm. Ellie guided Miguel to space his seedlings properly. Lily carefully pressed seeds into the ground with her brace-supported legs beside her. The entire scene resonated with a sense of renewal, and Vincent felt a stirring inside him. He couldn't recall the last time he voluntarily spent a morning doing something so simple yet meaningful. Noah grinned at Vincent, apparently amused to see the usually immaculate CEO digging up soil. "Looking good, boss," he teased. Vincent laughed, realizing how foreign the word boss sounded in this nurturing environment. Here, among the children and the living earth, titles felt irrelevant. After a half hour, the children proudly stood to admire their work. Tiny seedlings, watered and patted into place, formed neat rows in the raised bed. Ellie announced, "We'll check on them every day, see how they grow. Remember, plants need care just like we do." Vincent gently squeezed Paige's shoulder, feeling a surge of pride. This place, once an accidental destination, was now inseparable from his life. The question nagged, could he truly protect it from TechVision's corporate machinery? As the kids ran off to the next activity, Ellie wiped her forehead, leaving a smudge of dirt. She caught Vincent's gaze. "Thank you for helping," she said, her voice softer. "You look more comfortable like this." Her eyes flicked to his jeans. "Less armor." Vincent offered a small shrug, a rueful smile. "Maybe I'm learning I don't need as much armor anymore." He gathered the used seed packets, feeling the dawn of something new within him, an acceptance that he was no longer the man who once found safety in rigid routines. Standing amid the sweet scent of fresh earth, he resolved to move forward not just for Paige, but for all the children who thrived here. If that meant risking his career or forging alliances he never imagined, then so be it. He glanced at Ellie one last time, noting her cautious but genuine smile. Rebirth, he realized, wasn't just happening in the garden. It was happening in him, too. The next morning, Vincent and Ellie sat side by side in the modest meeting room at Little Explorers. Stacks of paperwork lay in front of them. City documents, property records, and projected budget proposals. Martha joined them, carefully reading through a binder labeled Historical Preservation Initiatives. A hush settled, broken only by occasional page-turning. Though the atmosphere was tense, it felt different from the hostility they'd shared weeks earlier. Vincent cleared his throat. "I've scheduled a conference with the city's Planning and Development Office this Friday. Diane is gathering the final data on local historical sites. Jeremy from my CSR team will present how TechVision can benefit from a philanthropic partnership." Ellie tapped a pencil against her notepad. "I can gather testimonials from current parents. Rachel is drafting letters of support. We can also invite local journalists for a visit next week. Show them the programs we run here." She paused, locking eyes with Vincent. "It'll strengthen our public argument." Martha weighed in softly. "And if we manage to secure that official heritage listing, the building becomes far more difficult to demolish." She flipped another page, sighing at the legal jargon. "We never expected to rely on city bureaucracy, but here we are." The synergy around the table felt like a tenuous truce, each member offering resources to build a shared vision. It was, in many ways, an unlikely alliance. Vincent, the corporate CEO, Ellie, the idealistic educator, and Martha, the property owner caught in financial strain, yet their common goal bound them to save little explorers from destruction. Noah and a few parents joined them halfway through, carrying coffee and pastries. James, the widowed father of Mia, carefully placed a box of donuts on the table. "Fuel for the resistance," he joked, and everyone cracked a brief smile. Rachel, the lawyer mom, spread out a map of the neighborhood, identifying potential supporters among local shops and community groups. As they strategized, Vincent occasionally caught Ellie's eye. She was still guarded, but there was a mutual respect in the way she nodded when he spoke. At one point, she murmured, "I have to admit, your plan is thorough." He responded with a gentle smile, relieved that at least she recognized his earnest efforts. The sting of betrayal she once felt had lessened, replaced by a cautious optimism. They worked for hours, finalizing their agenda for the city meeting. By late afternoon, the group began to disperse. Parents needed to pick up children, and Martha had a doctor's appointment. Vincent lingered, double-checking a file on budgeting. Ellie approached him, arms folded. "You look tired," she observed, soft concern edging her voice. He rubbed his eyes. "I've been up most nights preparing, but it's worth it if we can succeed." Ellie hesitated, then added, "Thank you for all you're doing. I can't say I fully trust everything will work out, but I see how hard you're fighting." Her gaze dropped to the floor, then back up. "The kids need this place, even Paige, and I need it too." Vincent's chest tightened with empathy. He recalled learning that Ellie's parents had passed away when she was young, leaving her to navigate life mostly on her own. "Then let's save it," he said with quiet conviction. "Together." She nodded, and a fragile smile warmed her face. "Deal." Outside, Vincent saw Paige painting rocks with other children, carefully creating colorful designs. His daughter spotted him and rushed over, holding up a rock adorned with swirls of blue and green. "It's for Mommy," she announced, eyes bright. "Can we put it in the garden at home?" Touched, Vincent crouched down to examine her handiwork. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. I'm sure she'd love it." Ellie observed from a short distance, the sight of father and daughter reminding her why she kept fighting. This daycare wasn't just a livelihood, it was a lifeline for families healing, learning, and growing. She hoped that by teaming up with Vincent, they could protect that mission. As Vincent and Paige headed to the car, he replayed the day's collaborative spirit in his mind. The alliance forming between him, Ellie, Martha, and the parents was both unexpected and profound. He sensed that only by combining resources, Ellie's educational passion, Martha's ownership of the property, and his corporate leverage, could they stand a chance against the behemoth of profit-driven logic. The thought both bolstered and worried him. So much depended on a delicate balance of trust and shared goals. Driving away, Vincent reflected on the puzzle pieces sliding into place. The official historical research, the philanthropic foundation concept, community support, and media attention. It felt like standing on a tightrope. One misstep could send everything crashing down. Yet for the first time, he realized he wasn't walking that tightrope alone. He glanced at Paige in the rearview mirror, clutching her painted rock. Hope glowed in her small smile. If they succeeded, she would continue flourishing in the place that had brought her so much joy. And perhaps, Vincent thought, He might reclaim a part of himself he'd long buried, the part that believed in compassion, vulnerability, and the kind of love Catherine had always championed. With the clock ticking toward the city meeting, every day mattered. But for now, at least, they had each other, and they had a plan. At 10 o'clock sharp on a crisp Wednesday morning, members of TechVision's board arrived at Little Explorers. Marcus had spearheaded the idea of a site visit, hoping to reveal any weaknesses in Vincent's philanthropic proposition. Vincent, though anxious, saw it as a chance to show them the daycare's real value. Ellie, Martha, and several parents had prepared meticulously for this day. As soon as the executives stepped onto the porch, they were greeted by bright decorations made by the children, hand-painted signs reading, "Welcome to our school," and cartoonish drawings of flowers and butterflies. Paige and some of her friends stood in a line, each holding small bouquets for the visitors. Marcus, suited impeccably as always, accepted a child's offering with a perfunctory nod. Ellie approached, wearing a floral dress and a gracious smile. "Thank you for coming," she said, gesturing for them to enter. "We hope you'll see why this place is so meaningful." Inside, a swirl of activity awaited. Children were broken into groups, showcasing what they'd learned that week. One station demonstrated simple science experiments, like baking soda volcanoes, while another group practiced counting using colorful blocks. Lily, with her leg braces, eagerly painted a mural alongside Noah. Rachel stood with a few other parents in the corner, ready to discuss legal and community support. James took photos, capturing the children's excited faces. Marcus surveyed the room like a buyer inspecting a flawed product. "This is very quaint," he remarked. Vincent clenched his jaw but forced a smile, guiding Marcus toward the back garden. "We use this area for lessons on biology and responsibility," he explained. "The kids recently planted herbs. They check their growth each day, learning patience and nurture." Ellie chimed in. "We want them to explore, ask questions, and develop confidence in their abilities. It's not about rote learning, it's about curiosity." Marcus barely hid his skepticism. "And how does that translate into tangible metrics?" Before Ellie could respond, Paige darted over, clutching a scrapbook. She hesitated, then offered it to Marcus. "We made this. It shows the things we do. And I drew pictures of my daddy at school with us." She looked up with a shy yet hopeful smile. Marcus blinked, uncomfortable at the child's direct approach. He flipped through the scrapbook, pausing on a page showing a group of smiling kids in the garden. Another page featured a crayon drawing of Vincent, Ellie, and Paige holding hands under a bright sun. Marcus coughed, closing the book and returning it to Paige. "Yes, well, that's nice," he mumbled. Vincent signaled for the group to gather in the main room, where Martha stood by a large easel with diagrams outlining the proposed foundation structure. "Welcome, all," she began in a clear, steady voice. "I've owned this property for decades, and it was once my mother's school. It's dear to my heart. Vincent and Ellie have a plan that preserves not just the building, but the spirit of education it has fostered for generations." Jeremy from TechVision's CSR department stepped forward, presenting slides on a small projector. He walked the board through potential sponsorship deals, community grants, and tax incentives. Rachel discussed pending historical designation paperwork. Parents gave quick testimonials about how the daycare had profoundly impacted their children's development. In the corner, the kids performed a short skit about cities of the future, using recycled materials to build imaginative structures, a demonstration of creativity and environmental awareness. At one point, Lily hobbled over to Marcus, offering him a carefully painted picture of a skyscraper that integrated green spaces. "It's an invention we made," she explained, "so everyone can have a nice place to learn and play." Her earnestness seemed to chip away at Marcus's aloof facade. He nodded politely. When the presentations concluded, a hush settled. All eyes turned to the board members, who huddled near the entrance to confer. Vincent's stomach twisted in knots. Paige, sensing the tension, clung to his hand. Ellie stood nearby, gaze flicking anxiously between Vincent and the board. Martha clasped her cane with white-knuckled grips. At last, Marcus cleared his throat. "We appreciate the demonstration," he said in a measured tone. "It's evident this daycare holds meaning for you all. The board will take your proposal under advisement. However, we must remember TechVision's core objectives." One board member, a woman named Karen, spoke up. "I found the visit enlightening. These children aren't just receiving care. They're learning through innovative methods. We should weigh the public goodwill factor." Marcus's lips thinned. "We'll reconvene at headquarters tomorrow for a formal vote. I trust everyone will be prepared." With that, the group filed out. The door closed behind them, leaving behind the bright decorations and hopeful gazes of children. Vincent exhaled heavily. "That's it, then." Ellie stepped closer, placing a hand on his arm. "At least they saw what we offer. We did our best." Paige tugged on Vincent's sleeve. "Daddy, do you think Mr. Marcus liked my book?" Vincent bent down, smoothing a wisp of hair from her face. "I think you made him think, honey. Sometimes that's the most we can do." Martha and Noah began to clean up, and parents comforted one another, uncertain yet slightly encouraged. Though the board had not given a definitive answer, Vincent sensed that something had shifted. The children's genuine enthusiasm, the parents' heartfelt stories, and the carefully prepared foundation plan were hard to ignore. For the first time, he saw a flicker of doubt in Marcus's rigid posture. Perhaps the final decision would still be a battle, but at least now, Little Explorers had shown it was more than a stumbling block on TechVision's path. It was a vital community oasis worth preserving. Late afternoon sunlight flooded the spacious atrium of TechVision's headquarters, illuminating a cluster of executives who had gathered for the long-awaited board vote. Vincent paced near the conference room door, rifling through his notes. His nerves buzzed. Only days had passed since the board's visit to Little Explorers, yet it felt like an eternity. He half expected Marcus to march out and declare the deal done, but the hush in the hallway suggested the battle was still in progress. Diane approached, pressing a fresh cup of coffee into Vincent's hand. "They've been in there a while," she murmured. "Marcus wanted to review financial projections again, but I think your community outreach is making them hesitate." Vincent nodded gratefully, taking a sip of the coffee, though he barely tasted it. He glanced at the elevator doors, recalling how he used to stride into TechVision each morning with unshakable confidence. Now, everything he cared about hung in the balance. Not just his career, but Paige's happiness, the daycare's survival, and a promise he'd made to Catherine and to himself to create something more meaningful than a profit-driven enterprise. Moments later, Susan, the senior board member who had shown an open mind, stepped out. Her expression was guarded but not grim. "They're ready for you." Vincent inhaled, steeled himself, and walked into the conference room. Inside, the atmosphere crackled with tension. The long table was scattered with documents bearing TechVision's logo. Marcus sat at the far end, arms folded, surveying Vincent with cool detachment. Other board members shifted in their seats. Vincent spotted Jeremy, the CSR director, who gave him a discreet nod of encouragement. This was it, the deciding moment. Susan cleared her throat. "We've conducted a thorough discussion and reviewed the philanthropic proposal, along with the standard acquisition plan. Vincent, the board will hear any final statement you'd like to make before we vote." His heart thudded. He rose, smoothing the front of his jacket. "I won't repeat what you've already heard. Instead, I want to remind everyone of what we saw at Little Explorers, children learning in an environment that fosters curiosity, empathy, and resilience. The data supports that preserving this place can yield positive long-term returns. But more than that, it aligns with who we claim to be as a company: innovative, forward-thinking, and socially responsible. He paused, eyeing Marcus. If we demolish this daycare, we gain a building but lose something far more valuable: our integrity. Our employees watch what we do. Our customers watch. The world watches. I believe we can excel financially while also doing good. An uneasy silence lingered. Marcus tapped a pen on the table. Your passion is noted, Vincent. Let's proceed to the vote. He signaled to Diane, who passed out small tablets for electronic voting. One by one, board members keyed in their decisions. Vincent's palms dampened as he stood at the side, feeling the weight of time drag on. Finally, Susan reviewed the tally on her screen, lips set in a serious line. By a narrow margin, the board has voted in favor of the philanthropic proposal. A wave of relief surged through Vincent. He closed his eyes, exhaling the breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Marcus's jaw tightened. Susan continued, that means we'll form the Catherine Sanders Foundation and proceed with the partial renovation of the Mayfair Street property, preserving Little Explorers. However, this decision hinges on several performance milestones. If results don't meet expectations within a year, we reserve the right to revisit the acquisition. Vincent nodded, gratitude welling. Thank you. I accept these terms. He turned to Marcus, who sat rigid and silent. Eventually, Marcus rose. I disagree with this decision, but I abide by the board's will. His gaze swept the room. If this philanthropic dream fails, remember whose idea it was. With that, Marcus strode out, leaving behind a swirl of tension. But the other board members offered Vincent measured smiles or quiet handshakes. Jeremy patted his shoulder. Congratulations, Vincent. Now comes the real work, making it count. Within an hour, news spread through the building. Diane hugged Vincent in the corridor, tears of pride in her eyes. You did it, she whispered. You kept your promise. Exhausted yet elated, Vincent rushed to call Ellie, but her phone went straight to voicemail. He left a message, voice trembling slightly. The board approved the foundation. Little Explorers is safe, for now. We'll talk soon, okay? He ended the call, picturing her reaction. Would she breathe a sigh of relief or keep her guard up? He knew their personal journey was far from over. That evening, driving home, Vincent picked up Paige from the daycare. She bounded into his arms, squealing with excitement. No more bulldozers? She asked, eyes shining. Vincent shook his head, hugging her tight. Not anymore, sweetheart. Paige clung to him, burying her face in his shoulder. He inhaled the sweet scent of her shampoo, overwhelmed with gratitude for this fragile victory. Arriving at their apartment, Vincent realized that while the immediate threat was gone, the challenge of building a lasting foundation had just begun. But for the first time in years, he felt like his life and work had merged into a single purpose, one that honored Catherine's memory and promised Paige a world full of color, imagination, and love. The reconstruction of his life had started in earnest, and he was ready to embrace its messy, beautiful unfolding. 3 months later, the Catherine Sanders Foundation held an open house at Little Explorers to celebrate the start of renovations. The once peeling siding of the Victorian house was now replaced with fresh paint, maintaining its cheerful palette of pastel greens and blues. A small banner reading "New Beginnings" hung above the entrance. Children dashed around, squealing as they discovered the updated classrooms, bigger windows, improved lighting, and an enhanced outdoor play area. Parents, neighbors, and Tech Vision employees milled about, sipping punch and nibbling on homemade cookies. Vincent, standing near a table displaying the Foundation's mission statement, surveyed the bustling scene with quiet satisfaction. This was exactly what he had imagined, a merger of corporate resources and community spirit. Across the room, Ellie demonstrated a new interactive reading corner for some parents. She radiated enthusiasm, explaining how each cushion or shelf placement was carefully planned to foster comfort and engagement. When she caught Vincent's eye, she smiled, a genuine, open warmth he hadn't seen since before their conflict. Though their relationship remained unspoken, the tension that once marred their interactions had softened into something hopeful. Diane arrived, guiding a cluster of Tech Vision investors. "And here's the man of the hour," she announced, gesturing to Vincent with a flourish. "He'll tell you all about our philanthropic goals." Vincent chuckled sheepishly. He welcomed the investors, noting how even they seemed charmed by the daycare's lively energy, gone were the stiff reservations and suspicion that had once plagued such visits. Spotting Paige near the snack table, Vincent excused himself and drifted over. She was chatting animatedly with Lily and Miguel, their hands sticky from frosting. Paige noticed him and bounded forward. "Daddy, did you see the new art room? It's so big." "We can paint big pictures now." Her eyes sparkled with excitement. Lily pointed toward a corner where a mural was taking shape, abstract shapes, bright swirls, and painted handprints from the children. "That's going to be our friendship wall," Lily explained proudly. "Ellie says everyone can add their mark." Vincent nodded, heart full. Months ago, the threat of closure had loomed over these kids. Now they possessed a revitalized space that promised even greater opportunities. He ruffled Paige's hair. "I can't wait to see your masterpiece on that wall." While Paige and her friends scurried off to find more cookies, Vincent felt a hand on his shoulder. Turning, he found Ellie holding a small plate of brownies. "Thought you might need a sugar boost," she teased, passing him a brownie. He took it gratefully, acknowledging how natural it felt to receive her little gestures of kindness now. She gestured around the room. "Hard to believe how quickly it's coming together." Her eyes shone, gliding over the children, the parents, the improved facility. There's a new buzz in the air, like everyone finally breathes easy. Vincent set the brownie aside on a nearby table, longing to tell her how deeply he'd grown to admire her resilience. "It's because of you," he said softly. "Your vision, your refusal to give up on these kids." Ellie's cheeks flushed, and she looked down at her shoes, clearly moved. Gently, Vincent touched her elbow, drawing her closer to the edge of the room where the din of conversation receded. "I realize trust doesn't rebuild overnight," he began, choosing his words carefully. "But I want you to know I'm here, not just as a CEO or foundation director, but as someone who cares about what you've created." Ellie's gaze lifted, her green eyes vulnerable. "I'm trying to let go of the anger I felt. Sometimes, though, I remember how scared I was, how sure I was that we'd lose everything. It takes time to undo that." Vincent nodded, his voice hushed. "I understand. I'll keep showing up, doing the work." He paused, testing the waters. "Could I maybe take you to dinner sometime, away from daycares and corporate talk, just two people figuring out where they stand?" Her lips curved into a slight, uncertain smile. "I'd like that," she replied, voice quiet. There was an electricity in the moment, a fragile but undeniable acknowledgement that they were no longer simply partners in saving little explorers, but two individuals drawn to each other. Before they could say more, Martha's voice rose over the chatter. She held up a glass, calling for everyone's attention. "To the future of little explorers and the Catherine Sanders Foundation," she declared. A round of applause erupted, and Ellie gently slipped away to join the toast, leaving Vincent with a swirl of anticipation in his chest. After the cheers died down, the celebration continued. Children weaving through adult conversations, laughter echoing off the freshly painted walls. Vincent found Diane among the crowd, who gave him a discreet thumbs up after noticing Ellie's shy smile. The sense of new traditions forming was palpable. Friday family potlucks, volunteer afternoons, and possibly gatherings that weren't purely about childcare but about building real community bonds. As the open house wound down, Vincent stepped outside to catch a breath of cool evening air. He glanced back at the Victorian structure, now bathed in warm light, brimming with promise. The past few months had been a blur of anxiety, strategy, and slow, steady progress. But tonight, as the breeze carried the mingled sounds of children's voices and adult laughter, he felt a peace he hadn't experienced since before Catherine died. Here, in the midst of the new normal, he was forging something that truly mattered, and it felt like the beginning of a brighter chapter, one filled with hope for everyone involved. A year slipped by, in a flow of steady progress and occasional setbacks. Spring returned to Seattle, turning the city's trees a vibrant green and sprinkling pink petals across sidewalks. The Catherine Sanders Foundation, once a lofty idea, had grown into a robust program. Vincent and Ellie found themselves juggling a flurry of responsibilities: press interviews, parent workshops, and the continual evolution of little explorers. One sunny morning, they met early on the daycare's veranda to finalize a special project, a scholarship fund that would cover tuition for lower-income families. Pages of brochures lay spread across a small patio table, each featuring smiling children, including Paige and her friends, happily learning in the bright classrooms. Ellie tapped a pen against her chin. "So the plan is, we use part of the foundation's budget to subsidize up to 10 new students, right?" Vincent nodded. "Yes, and if the pilot goes well, we expand further." Jeremy's pitched the idea to a few of our corporate partners, hoping they'll sponsor additional scholarships. Martha joined them, cane in hand, but posture brimming with pride. "My mother always hoped this house would open its doors to children of all backgrounds," she said softly, looking out over the yard. She believed learning shouldn't be a luxury. Vincent placed a hand on Martha's shoulder. "We're making that belief a reality. Thank you for trusting us." The older woman's eyes glistened with tears, and Ellie gently placed her hand over Martha's. Their unspoken bond spoke volumes about how far they'd all come. As they worked, laughter emanated from the backyard. A group of children, led by Paige and Miguel, played a spirited game of hide-and-seek around the blossoming shrubs. Lily painted a new mural on the rear fence, and Ethan juggled foam balls, pretending he was a circus performer. The scene felt like a vivid testament to everything the foundation had accomplished. An hour later, Vincent excused himself to prepare for an afternoon event, the unveiling of a small memorial in the daycare's garden, dedicated to Catherine Sanders. It was a simple yet meaningful way to honor the woman whose ideals had sparked this endeavor. Paige had insisted on helping, collecting smooth stones from the beach cottage and painting them with butterflies, symbols of change and renewal. When the time came, parents and children gathered outside near a graceful dogwood tree. In front of it stood a modest plaque bearing Catherine's name and a short inscription: "In loving memory of a dream for every child to thrive." A hush fell as Vincent stepped forward, heart pounding with emotion. Ellie stood at his side, her fingers lightly grazing his arm in quiet support. "Thank you all for joining us," Vincent began, voice trembling slightly. "Catherine was my wife, Paige's mother, and the inspiration for much of what we've built here. She believed in a world where every child, regardless of circumstance, could grow, laugh, and discover their potential. His gaze swept the crowd, landing briefly on Paige, who stood next to Lily with tears in her bright blue eyes. This dogwood tree was chosen because it symbolizes durability and rebirth, Vincent continued. Qualities we've all experienced these past months, overcoming challenges, learning to trust, and finding ways to flourish. It's a reflection of what Catherine wanted for our daughter and for every child. He paused, struggling with the wave of grief and gratitude. Ellie gently squeezed his arm. Drawing strength from her presence, he concluded, "Thank you for being part of this legacy. May we continue to grow, just like this tree, and offer shelter and strength to anyone who walks through our doors." A ripple of applause broke the quiet. Paige stepped forward, carefully placing the painted stones around the plaque. Lily and Miguel joined her, adding their own mementos, handwritten notes in tiny plastic sleeves. The children's offerings formed a small, colorful border around Catherine's memorial, a testament to how her spirit now lived on through their creativity and innocence. After the brief ceremony, conversation resumed, parents hugging Vincent or offering kind words, children running off to resume their play. Ellie remained by Vincent's side, face flushed with emotion. She pressed her hand lightly to his chest. "That was beautiful," she whispered. "She'd be so proud." Vincent's throat tightened. "It's all of us, Paige, you, Martha, the parents, that make it beautiful." He glanced at the plaque once more, feeling an ache of loss mingled with warmth. In that quiet corner of the garden, he sensed Catherine's presence, not as sorrow, but as a guiding light. Before the crowd drifted away, Paige slipped her hand into Vincent's. "Daddy, can we keep adding stones? I want the circle to get bigger every year." Vincent knelt, hugging her. "Absolutely, honey," he murmured. "We'll keep adding to it, together." The sun hovered high in the sky, illuminating the newly placed memorial. Ellie watched as Vincent led Paige back inside, her heart soft with admiration. This daycare, once threatened by corporate greed, had blossomed into a sanctuary of love, dedication, and fresh starts. Catherine's legacy was no longer a silent dream, it was a living, breathing reality. And with each passing day, the circle of colored stones around her plaque would expand, a testament to the promise that every child deserved to be nurtured, cherished, and allowed to soar. Sunset draped little explorers in soft gold as the community gathered to celebrate the daycare's second anniversary under the Catherine Sanders Foundation. The yard bustled with joyful noise, parents chatting, children squealing with delight, and the gentle strum of a guitar as Noah led a sing-along. Vincent, wearing a simple linen shirt, helped set up a refreshment table laden with fruit punch, cupcakes, and a whimsical cake shaped like a butterfly. Bright paper lanterns swayed overhead, and the newly renovated garden gleamed. The dogwood tree by Catherine's memorial displayed delicate pink blossoms. The circle of painted stones at its base had grown considerably, each stone a symbol of a child's journey or a family's gratitude. Paige, now 6 years old, carefully arranged a fresh cluster of blossoms there, her face glowing with contentment. Nearby, Ellie finished hanging a handmade banner that read, "Celebrating 2 years of wonder and discovery." Her cheeks flushed as she glanced at Vincent. "Every time I see how the kids have grown, I feel like I'm living in a dream," she said. "A good one." Vincent's expression brimmed with pride. "You made it possible," he replied. "I just helped along the way." Families began sharing stories of transformations they'd witnessed in their children. Miguel speaking confidently in front of a crowd. Lily preparing to start elementary school with a newfound sense of independence. Ethan discovering his passion for music. At the heart of every anecdote was the nurturing environment Ellie and her staff had cultivated. Martha mingled with the crowd, a happy gleam in her eyes. She often told visitors that her mother's spirit danced in the cheerful chaos of the daycare. Rachel, the attorney mom, chatted animatedly about a new partnership with local charities. James took photographs for a small exhibit capturing the children's growth, intending to display them in the daycare's hallway. Vincent drifted from group to group, receiving hugs, handshakes, and words of thanks. Yet his mind wandered to a small black box, hidden in his jacket pocket, a symbol of the next step he hoped to take. He and Ellie had grown closer over the months, sharing quiet dinners, heartfelt conversations about the future, and cautious steps toward a deeper connection. Though he hadn't said it aloud, Vincent knew he loved her. Tonight felt like the right moment to express that in a tangible way. As dusk settled, the paper lanterns glowed brighter, creating a magical atmosphere. The children gathered near the dogwood tree, each waiting for a turn to place a painted rock or a personalized token around Catherine's memorial. Paige held Vincent's hand, gazing up. "Daddy, can I say something?" she asked, eyes shimmering in the lantern light. Vincent nodded, guiding her forward. The small crowd stilled, giving Paige their attention. She clutched a heart-shaped rock in her tiny hand. "This is for Mommy," she said, voice trembling with emotion beyond her years. "Thank you for giving me a daddy who loves me, and for sending Ellie to take care of me too." She placed the rock among the others, a tear slipping down her cheek. A hush fell, a collective intake of breath as onlookers fought to keep their composure. Ellie gently touched Paige's shoulder, her own eyes moist. Vincent swallowed against the lump in his throat, pulling his daughter into a protective hug. He heard the quiet sniffles from around them, sensing the rawness of Paige's words. In that tender silence, Vincent felt a surge of courage. Carefully, he reached into his pocket and withdrew the small black box. Turning to Ellie, he spoke in a voice meant just for her ears, though the onlookers crowded close. "Ellie, you've brought so much light to my life and Paige's. You helped us heal and find joy again. He paused, heart pounding. "I want to share our future, to stand with you in everything we build here, for the children and for us." Gently, he opened the box, revealing a simple, elegant ring. A wave of astonished murmurs washed over the gathering. Ellie's hand flew to her mouth, tears immediately welling in her eyes. "Vincent," she whispered, barely able to speak. He took her free hand, voice trembling with sincerity. "Will you give me the honor of walking forward together? Marry me?" For a heartbeat, everything slowed. The lanterns flickered, the children gasped, and the air bristled with anticipation. Ellie, cheeks wet with tears, nodded fervently. "Yes," she managed, a shaky laugh escaping her lips. Applause erupted, and the children cheered, though most didn't fully grasp the moment's significance. Paige whooped with delight, hugging them both. Ellie extended her left hand, and Vincent slid the ring onto her finger, a quiet vow passing between them. All around, parents wiped their eyes, staff members clapped, and Martha beamed with grandmotherly pride. The dogwood blossoms rustled gently in the night breeze, as though blessing this union born of shared dreams and second chances. Together, they stood beneath the lantern glow, Vincent, Ellie, and Paige, enveloped by the warmth of the daycare community. In that circle of love, where Catherine's memory lived on and new beginnings constantly emerged, Vincent felt a profound sense of completion. Life had led him down a winding path, from tragedy and obsession with control to this moment of open-hearted commitment, and as the celebration continued around them, he realized that with Ellie by his side, he had found a happiness he once feared lost forever. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.